The instant I shared that, I still possessed our family's cabin by the lake, right after being informed I wasn't wanted at my son's wedding. His fiancée's champagne glass broke into pieces on their polished marble floor. I am Eleanor Winters, and for 4.5 decades, I had privately kept our family's cherished property safe, while my children thought it vanished during my divorce many years earlier. Before we continue with the story, please let me know where you are reading from. If this narrative resonates with you, please consider subscribing, as I have something particularly significant planned for tomorrow. This picture was captured almost 40 years ago, me at 25 years old, standing with my young son Michael, who was just 4 outside our family's lakeside cabin, located in Pine Ridge. We were celebrating the last summer vacation before my divorce would be finalized. The cabin had been owned by my family for 3 generations, a place where I had enjoyed every summer as a child, and where I had hoped my own children and grandchildren would create their own fond memories. The look of worry in my eyes contrasts sharply with the carefree smile on Michael's face. He was too young to grasp the fact that our family life was on the brink of changing permanently. My father constructed that cabin using his own hands in 1952, dedicating his entire savings and countless weekends to building something he hoped would last beyond his lifetime. "Eleanor," he told me while teaching me how to fish from the dock, "what you see can often be misleading, but actual ownership represents reality. Never let go of what matters most, even when others believe you have nothing left." That piece of wisdom would prove remarkably accurate decades in the future, in ways neither of us could have ever foreseen. I married Richard Winters when I was young, a captivating corporate lawyer with impressive qualifications and influential family connections. Our wedding was highlighted in the local society news, the daughter of a construction foreman who worked as a school teacher marrying into one of the city's established families. By the time our son reached 3, Richard's professional standing had soared, bringing considerable wealth, but also extended periods away from home and a growing emotional distance between us. "It's just one dinner," Eleanor, became his routine justification for missing out on family moments. Eventually, those dinners included Stephanie, a junior partner within his company. When I discovered their affair, the subsequent divorce was acrimonious and highly publicized. Richard's influential family employed every legal tactic available to minimize the assets I would receive in the settlement. "The cabin is not open for negotiation," Richard's attorney declared during the mediation session. "The property was acquired during the marriage and is a substantial asset that must be converted to cash and divided." His voice carried the confidence of someone who had a perfect winning record against individuals of my humble financial standing. What remained unknown to anyone at that time, a secret I would carefully protect for decades, was that I had already secured the single thing that held the most importance for me. 3 months before initiating the divorce process, sensing that the marriage was beyond repair, I had quietly transferred ownership of the lakeside property into a small privately managed trust established under my maiden name. The official legal documents indicated that the property had been sold to clear other outstanding debts when, in reality, I had placed it safely out of Richard's reach. My college roommate Sarah, who was now a lawyer specializing in estates, had assisted in setting up the arrangement. "This isn't about dishonesty, Eleanor," she reassured me when I voiced my reservations. "It's about safeguarding your family's heritage from someone who never genuinely appreciated its worth." "I'm genuinely sorry about the cabin, Eleanor," Richard stated with a forced display of sympathy after the divorce was finalized. "Some developer will probably just tear it down anyway, I responded with a silent nod, accepting his condolences for a loss that, in fact, had not occurred, understanding that sometimes maintaining silence is the best way to protect what is most precious. In the challenging years that followed, I built a new life for Michael and myself in a modest apartment located across town. I resumed my career teaching high school English, a profession I had given up during my marriage at Richard's insistence. Money was tight, but we managed to get by. My fellow teachers often expressed admiration for how skillfully I managed on a limited salary, never realizing that a substantial portion of it was allocated to property taxes and upkeep for a cabin they believed had been lost during my divorce. What my son never understood was that each summer, while he spent time with his father's new family on trips to Europe, I would dedicate 2 invaluable weeks at our family cabin, quietly performing maintenance and preserving it for a future I hoped would one day include grandchildren, building sandcastles on the very same shoreline where I had played as a child. "Mom, why don't we ever go to the lake anymore?" 10-year-old Michael inquired one day, recalling faint impressions of those earlier summers. "That is gone now, darling," I replied, the half-truth tasting bitter in my mouth. "But we will create new memories together instead." I justified my deception by promising myself that one day when he was older and capable of understanding, I would reveal the entire truth and pass the cabin down to him, just as my father had intended. As Michael matured, he gradually absorbed his father's values and perspective on life. The summer visits to Europe evolved into semester-long study abroad programs and eventually an international business degree financed through Richard's family connections. During his university years, our phone conversations became shorter and occurred less frequently. When he did come to visit, he often surveyed my modest home with a mix of embarrassment and pity. "You could certainly improve your situation, Mom," he once suggested after securing his first job in finance. "I know some truly excellent financial advisors who could help you get the most out of your teacher's pension." The irony of his concern regarding my financial state, while I was secretly supporting a valuable lakeside property, was something I kept to myself, offering a smile and thanking him for his thoughtful suggestion. I observed with a blend of pride and apprehension as my son transformed from the curious, warm-hearted young boy who had once collected pine cones at our cabin into a polished young professional who measured success through corporate takeovers and outward appearances. His girlfriend, who later became his fiancée, Vanessa, accelerated this transformation. Coming from a family similar to Richard's, she viewed my teaching profession and unpretentious way of life as charming, but ultimately limited. "Michael tells me you were quite the entertainer in your younger days," she remarked during our initial meeting, as if my life of genuine purpose and service belonged solely to some distant historical period. However, I could never have predicted how completely these differing values would create a rift between us, or how the cabin I had secretly maintained would eventually become the focal point of a family confrontation that would alter everything. The first clear indication that Michael's fiancée regarded me as an inconvenience rather than a member of the family came during their engagement party held at Richard's sprawling lakefront estate, located ironically merely 20 miles down the shoreline from our own family cabin. The invitation arrived printed on thick, expensive cardstock, formally addressed to Mrs. Eleanor Winters, accompanied by a brief handwritten message from Vanessa stating, "We are keeping the event small and refined. No need to bring anything except your presence." On the evening of the party, I chose to wear a simple blue dress I had bought for the school's recent retirement ceremony, complemented by my mother's pearl necklace, a modest yet perfectly suitable ensemble. Upon arriving at the vast mansion with its meticulously landscaped grounds and valet parking service, I immediately felt the stark contrast between my world and the one my son now inhabited. "Mom, you made it." Michael greeted me with a quick peck on the cheek within the grand marble foyer with its soaring ceiling. His eyes briefly scanned my outfit with a fleeting judgment before he quickly added, "Vanessa's parents and their close friends are over by the main bar. Perhaps you would feel more comfortable on the garden terrace where it is quieter." This subtle redirection was not new to me. Over the 3 years of their relationship, I had grown accustomed to being gently guided away from Vanessa's social circle sophisticated, international travelers and financial professionals who viewed my career in public education with polite but clear disinterest. What felt new was Michael's increasing comfort with this arrangement. Later that same evening, I overheard my son speaking to an elegant older couple positioned near the champagne fountain that was a prominent feature in the center of the room. Eleanor. Yes, my mother dedicated her entire life to teaching. He was explaining using the same tone one might use to describe an unusual but ultimately impractical life choice. She truly is one of the unsung heroes, even though her experiences have been somewhat restricted. How truly commendable that she discovered fulfillment in such humble work. The woman responded, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she gently patted Michael's arm. And how incredibly fortunate she must feel, witnessing you achieve so much more. Everyone follows different paths in life. Michael replied smoothly, raising his glass slightly. I am simply grateful that I can ensure her comfort now that she has retired. The irony of the situation struck me deeply. This son, who sincerely believed he needed to safeguard my financial security, had no awareness that I owned a property worth more than his annual income, maintained quietly through decades of careful financial planning and personal sacrifice. However, the greater pain was hearing him describe my chosen profession, my deliberate life dedicated to service and genuine value, as if it were merely a charming limitation rather than a meaningful and intentional choice. These types of moments multiplied in the months that followed their engagement. Michael and Vanessa purchased a luxurious condominium unit in the city's most exclusive skyscraper, and my invitations to visit became increasingly rare and seemingly orchestrated. When I was invited, Vanessa would make subtle comments about my charming old-fashioned views or simple traditional preferences, each remark carrying the implicit suggestion that I was a relic from a bygone era rather than a woman with her own perfectly valid perspective. Michael mentions you haven't traveled extensively, she observed during one such visit, as we sat in their impeccably decorated living room, adorned with carefully chosen art and offering spectacular city views. We are planning to spend at least a month abroad every single year. I cannot fathom being so tied to one place. I offered a polite smile, my thoughts drifting to the peaceful mornings I had spent observing the mist rising from the lake at our cabin, the breathtaking colors of autumn reflected in its waters, the deep sense of peace that comes from intimately knowing one beloved location. Different kinds of richness, I suppose, was my only response, unwilling to defend my life choices to someone who showed no genuine interest in understanding them. My decision to retire from teaching after 32 years coincided with their wedding preparations, and the convergence of these two major life events highlighted just how completely Michael had adopted his father's value system. At my modest retirement celebration held in the high school library, surrounded by colleagues and former students whose lives I had positively impacted, Michael arrived late and departed early, clearly ill at ease in a setting so far removed from the prestigious circles he now navigated. You could truly do so much more now, Mom, he suggested as we walked to the parking lot afterward. You could travel, take some additional courses at the community college, perhaps even relocate to a more desirable apartment in a better neighborhood. I am quite content with my life precisely as it is, I responded. Not everyone requires external approval to feel fulfilled in life. He furrowed his brow slightly, failing to recognize the gentle critique embedded within my words. It is not about seeking approval. It is about enhancing your quality of life. Dad mentioned he would be willing to assist you with some investments if you are concerned about your teacher's pension. The mention of Richard offering financial help after decades of minimal involvement in our lives stung more deeply than Michael could possibly comprehend. Following the divorce, his father had consistently paid the mandatory child support, but had otherwise remained distant, primarily appearing for significant events, like graduations where his presence would be duly noted by his social contacts. The fact that Michael now viewed his father as a financial authority figure, capable of guiding me, felt like a profound betrayal. What my son failed to grasp, what I had never disclosed to him, was that throughout those 32 years of dedicated teaching, I had not only successfully maintained our secret family cabin, but had also built a modest, yet robust financial foundation for myself. My teacher's pension, combined with carefully managed investments, guided by other resourceful colleagues, provided ample resources for the comfortable life I had deliberately chosen. The planning for the wedding brought these differences into sharper focus. Michael and Vanessa had selected an exceptionally exclusive international resort for their ceremony, a location that would necessitate considerable travel expenses for me, especially on my teacher's pension. When I politely inquired about the specific arrangements, gently suggesting that a local celebration might allow more family members to attend, their response was immediate and revealing. This celebration is centered around what Vanessa and I desire for our special day. Michael explained his tone, implying my suggestion was unreasonable. Dad has already arranged for a private jet for his family members and guests. I calmly nodded and assured him I would manage the arrangements, although the implied competition with Richard's extravagant spending was unmistakably clear. What Michael did not know was that I had already decided to allocate some of my carefully saved funds to attend his wedding with dignity and grace, viewing it as an essential investment in fostering our future relationship, rather than a mere extravagance. 3 months prior to the wedding date, Vanessa invited me to lunch at an upscale downtown restaurant. It was our first one-on-one meeting without Michael present. The invitation itself was sufficiently unusual to immediately put me on alert. "Eleanor!" She began after the waiter had recorded our orders, her voice carrying the polished diplomacy of someone delivering a pre-scripted speech. "I wanted to speak with you regarding the final wedding plans." "Of course," I replied, maintaining a composed and pleasant expression. "I have already booked my flights and secured my accommodations. Everything is confirmed." That is actually precisely what I wish to discuss. She delicately adjusted her water glass, avoiding direct eye contact with me. Michael and I have been finalizing the precise guest list, and we have come to realize that with his father inviting his extended family and numerous business associates, coupled with my family's extensive network, the scale of the event has grown considerably larger than initially planned. I waited patiently, sensing that the true purpose of this meeting was yet to unfold. "The reality is," she continued, her voice adopting a tone of practiced concern, "we are striving to create a very specific overall atmosphere for the entire weekend. The resort possesses a certain exclusive character that we are determined to maintain. We are genuinely concerned that you might find yourself feeling uncomfortable among such a large number of prominent and high-profile guests. I have had the opportunity to attend many different types of events throughout my life, Vanessa. I responded calmly and steadily. I am perfectly capable of conducting myself appropriately in any given social setting. She offered a tight, strained smile. Naturally, you are. That was not precisely what I meant. She paused once more. It is simply that Michael's father will be hosting a significant number of his crucial business connections who could be quite important for Michael's future professional prospects. The interactions could become somewhat complicated with you present, given the historical context of the relationships involved. The underlying message was now explicitly clear. My presence at my own son's wedding celebration was perceived as an inconvenience, a potential source of embarrassment, a disruptive element to the carefully curated image they wished to present. Are you suggesting that I should not attend my son's wedding? I inquired directly, my voice remaining composed despite the undeniable hurt beginning to well up in my chest. Not at all, certainly not. She responded quickly, though her eyes conveyed a distinctly different sentiment. We are simply proposing that perhaps you might experience greater comfort celebrating with us once we have returned, perhaps in a much more private and intimate setting. We could certainly arrange a special dinner specifically for the three of us. The carefully chosen diplomatic language could not effectively conceal the true situation that was unfolding. I was, in essence, being asked not to attend my only child's wedding. I understand, I said finally. My thoughts were already racing ahead to the significant decisions that would soon need to be made. And does Michael share this particular perspective? Her moment of hesitation provided the complete answer. He understands the inherent complexities of the overall situation. It was actually his father who initially pointed out how potentially awkward the seating arrangements might become. And Michael concurred that perhaps this arrangement might be the best solution for everyone involved. In that precise moment, sitting directly across from this woman, who would very soon become my daughter-in-law, I fully realized that the cabin I had meticulously preserved through decades of personal sacrifice had acquired a completely new and significant meaning. What had originally begun as a deliberate effort to maintain a cherished family legacy had now evolved into a powerful symbol of something much more personal. My resolute refusal to be quietly erased from my own family's ongoing story. Please ensure you inform Michael that I would like to speak with him directly regarding this matter, I stated as I gathered my purse to depart my lunch, barely touched. Some conversations are far too important to be conducted through intermediaries. As I drove the familiar route back to my home, a detailed plan began to take shape in my mind, one that would unavoidably compel my son to confront not merely my rightful and enduring place in his life, but also the core values he had seemingly abandoned in his relentless pursuit of social status and acceptance within a world that primarily measured an individual's worth through superficial appearances rather than genuine substance. The cabin that had successfully remained my closely guarded secret for 4 long decades was now on the verge of becoming the focal point of a long overdue and unavoidable family reckoning. The day immediately following my unsettling lunch meeting with Vanessa, I consciously initiated what I privately referred to as my family recovery plan. Despite the significant hurt and understandable anger churning deep within me, I experienced a strange and unexpected sense of clear purpose. If my son and his fiancée genuinely believed they possessed the ability to simply remove me from his most significant life event solely based on outward social appearances and Richard's personal comfort, then it was unquestionably time for me to seriously reconsider the future fate of the family legacy I had carefully preserved for many decades. My very first call was directed to Sarah Thompson, my trusted college roommate, who had been instrumental in helping me establish the private trust for the cabin an astonishing 40 years earlier. Now a highly respected senior partner at her prominent law firm with a specific expertise in estate planning, Sarah had diligently maintained the intricate legal structure of the trust throughout the decades, diligently ensuring it remained both fully protected and entirely private. "This is certainly unexpected news," she remarked thoughtfully, when I carefully explained the entire situation during our meeting, held in her elegant downtown office. The space itself, with its walls lined with leather-bound books and an atmosphere of discreet wealth, served as a reminder of the distinct professional paths we had followed. Yet our enduring friendship had remained steadfast. "You have specifically maintained that trust with the clear intention of eventually passing the cabin on to Michael someday. Are you absolutely certain that you wish to alter that plan now?" "I am not entirely certain of anything definitively just yet," I candidly admitted, smoothing down my skirt as I collected my thoughts. "But I absolutely need to fully understand all of my available options. If my son genuinely does not wish for me to be present at his wedding, perhaps he also holds no genuine desire for the family legacy I have worked so hard to preserve." Sarah offered a thoughtful nod of understanding. "Legally speaking, your current position is quite clear and straightforward. The property has consistently remained within the trust with you, designated as the sole beneficiary and trustee. You possess complete and absolute authority to determine its ultimate future disposition." She paused, deliberately observing me with the keen insight of decades of deep friendship. "But this entire situation is not truly about mere legal options, is it, Eleanor? This is about something much more profound and significant. It is fundamentally about recognition," I stated after a moment of quiet reflection. "Not simply recognition of my undisputed legal rights to the property, but equally important recognition of my legitimate and rightful place in my son's life. If my presence is not deemed sufficiently important to be genuinely included in his wedding celebration, then why should he ultimately stand to benefit from the extensive sacrifices I have personally made to diligently preserve something specifically for his future?" "Precisely what specific information do you require?" Sarah inquired, her tone seamlessly shifting to a highly efficient professional focus. "First and foremost, I need to fully comprehend what Michael currently knows or genuinely believes about the cabin. Has Richard ever made any mention of it to him over the years? Does Michael possess even the slightest inkling that the property still genuinely exists within our family's ownership?" These particular questions had persistently troubled me throughout a completely sleepless night. That would necessitate conducting some relatively discreet investigation, Sarah noted carefully. "I can certainly initiate inquiries through appropriate channels that will not raise any undue suspicions whatsoever." Secondly, I continued with my list of questions. "I need to understand all of my available options concerning the property itself. Am I legally permitted to sell it outright? Could I potentially donate it to a suitable organization? What would those specific legal processes fundamentally entail?" Sarah diligently made detailed notes as we meticulously outlined a comprehensive strategy. By the conclusion of our meeting, she had formally agreed to conduct a quiet and thorough investigation into what Michael might potentially know about the cabin, while I would simultaneously undertake a necessary visit to the property to accurately assess its current condition and determine its present market value. 3 days later, I made the familiar 2-hour drive to the Pine Ridge area. Although I made a point of visiting annually for routine maintenance, this particular trip felt distinctly different, heavily weighted with a clear purpose, and the distinct possibility of a final goodbye. The spring afternoon was absolutely perfect, warm sunlight filtering gently through the tall pine trees as I made the turn onto the familiar gravel road. The cabin stood exactly as it always had, its weathered cedar siding and forest green shutters serving as a silent testament to my father's skilled craftsmanship and my own dedicated decades of care. Inside, everything remained precisely as I had left it. During my visit the previous summer, the handmade quilts neatly folded on each of the beds, my father's fishing gear still hanging exactly where he had left it, on the porch, carefully preserved photo albums, meticulously documenting 4 generations of family gatherings safely stored on the bookshelves. I walked slowly through each individual room, consciously recalling cherished memories. Michael learning to confidently swim off the dock at the tender age of 6, my father patiently teaching me how to make his famous pancakes on the old cast-iron stove, my mother's gentle, soothing voice reading beautiful poems on quiet, rainy afternoons. This place was far more than just a piece of property. It was the tangible, physical embodiment of our entire family's shared history. The mere thought of complete strangers eventually owning it created a profound physical ache deep in my chest. Yet the equally painful thought of gifting it to a son who apparently did not genuinely value my essential place in his life felt just as unbearable. I spent the entire night at the cabin sitting peacefully on the dock as countless stars reflected brilliantly on the perfectly still lake surface, carefully considering options I had honestly never imagined would ever become necessary. By the following morning, I had reached a tentative but firm decision, one that would absolutely require confirmation from Sarah's ongoing investigation. A week subsequently passed, and Sarah called with her comprehensive findings. I have spoken with several reliable sources, including Richard's former law partner, who specifically handled some aspects of his estate planning, she carefully explained. It appears that Richard has consistently maintained the deliberate narrative that the cabin was permanently sold during your divorce proceedings. He has mentioned it occasionally to Michael over the years, typically using it as a specific example of assets that were necessarily liquidated during the settlement process. So Michael genuinely believes that the cabin is long gone. I confirmed experiencing a strange and conflicting mixture of relief and sadness at this realization. Yes, that is correct, Sarah continued, but there is additional information. According to my source, Michael and Vanessa have reportedly been actively looking at property in the Pine Ridge area for the past 6 months. Apparently, Richard specifically mentioned that the old family cabin site would soon be listed for sale, and he evidently believed it would make a highly appropriate wedding gift for them if they were able to reclaim it for the family. The immediate implications of this information struck me instantly. Richard knows that I still own the cabin. That seems highly probable, Sarah confirmed. Property records are publicly accessible information, although the specific structure of the trust does somewhat obscure the direct connection back to you. However, someone possessing Richard's substantial resources and extensive legal connections could certainly have discovered it. The precise timing strongly suggests he may be planning to reveal this information to Michael after the wedding ceremony, strategically presenting himself as the one who successfully recovered the valuable family property. The sheer audacity of his plan was absolutely breathtaking. After 40 long years, Richard had apparently discovered my carefully guarded secret and was now actively planning to exploit it for his own personal benefit and glory, deliberately attempting to recast himself as the valiant preserver of family heritage, rather than the man who had actively sought to strip it all away. "There is one final piece of information," Sarah added with slight hesitation. "According to my reliable source, Vanessa has been quite explicit regarding her specific plans for the property if they successfully acquire it. She fully intends to completely tear down the existing cabin structure and construct a modern large lake house that would be far more suitable for entertaining Richard's numerous business associates." The final crucial piece of the puzzle immediately clicked into place. Not only was I being deliberately excluded from my son's wedding, but the cherished family legacy that I had diligently preserved through decades of personal sacrifice was now intended to be completely demolished and summarily replaced with a conspicuous showcase for the very same values that had effectively destroyed my own marriage many years prior. "Thank you, Sarah." I stated, my resolve hardening considerably at this information. "This absolutely clarifies exactly what actions need to be taken now." Over the subsequent 2 weeks, I meticulously and methodically prepared for a direct confrontation that I had honestly never desired but could no longer conceivably avoid. Firstly, I carefully assembled all necessary documentation, comprehensively proving my continuous and undisputed ownership of the cabin official trust documents, detailed property tax records, and numerous maintenance receipts meticulously spanning 4 decades. Then I gathered a selection of significant photographs, vividly chronicling my regular personal visits to the property, clearly showcasing my careful and dedicated preservation of every single aspect my father had lovingly created. Most importantly, I mentally and emotionally prepared myself for what would undoubtedly be a painful but necessary reset of my fundamental relationship with my only child. The compelling evidence strongly suggested a level of deliberate calculation that simply could not be dismissed as a mere simple misunderstanding. Michael had not only willingly agreed to exclude me from his significant wedding day, but was apparently also planning to personally profit from Richard's recent discovery of property he genuinely believed had been permanently lost to our family many decades ago. The final and perhaps most emotionally challenging element of my preparation involved drafting crucial legal documents. Working closely with Sarah, I meticulously drafted and finalized documents that would formally remove Michael as the eventual beneficiary of the trust. Instead, I established specific provisions to formally donate the property to the Pine Ridge Environmental Conservancy upon my eventual passing, thereby definitively ensuring it would be permanently preserved in its natural, pristine state, rather than being subjected to extensive development. The irrevocable nature of these particular documents meant that once they were legally signed, this momentous decision could not be undone, a finality that weighed considerably heavily upon me as I contemplated the profound implications. "Are you absolutely certain, beyond any doubt, that this is precisely what you truly desire?" Sarah inquired seriously as she carefully slid the finalized papers across her desk towards me. "Once legally executed, these formal documents will permanently and definitively alter the succession plan for the property forever." I momentarily hesitated, my pen poised directly above the signature line. "I have dedicated 40 long years to meticulously preserving this cabin specifically for a son who now finds my presence too potentially embarrassing to genuinely include in his significant wedding celebration," I stated finally, my voice steady. "I absolutely need him to fully understand that genuine family legacy is not something you can simply disregard when it is inconvenient and then opportunistically reclaim when it becomes advantageous. And what if he responds with genuine remorse and sincere regret? What if this serves as the necessary wake-up call that you genuinely hope it might be?" I carefully considered this distinct possibility which genuinely represented my deepest and most fervent hope that confronting these difficult truths might somehow manage to reclaim the son I had lovingly raised before Richard's deeply ingrained values had fundamentally reshaped him. Let us explicitly include a specific contingency clause, I decided after a moment of thoughtful consideration. The formal donation to the Conservancy will not become legally irrevocable until either my unfortunate death or 1 full year from the precise date of official notification to Michael, whichever occurs later in time. That specific provision provides him with a tangible time frame to clearly demonstrate whether his own core values can still authentically align with everything that this property genuinely represents. Sarah nodded approvingly as she meticulously incorporated the specific notation into the documents. A door deliberately left slightly ajar, as wise and thoughtful as always, Eleanor. The subsequent weekend, Michael initiated contact and extended an invitation for me to join him and Vanessa for dinner at his condominium unit, a notably rare occurrence that immediately raised my suspicions given the recent unsettling conversation with Vanessa. His voice carried the distinct quality of forced casualness, clearly indicative of someone with a prearranged agenda. Just a small informal gathering with Vanessa and myself, he carefully explained. We have some final wedding updates that we specifically wanted to discuss directly with you. How genuinely thoughtful, I replied carefully, matching his light and airy tone, while strongly suspecting that the upcoming updates would likely involve the formal confirmation of my complete exclusion from the event. Saturday evening at exactly 7:00 works perfectly for me. This particular dinner invitation would inevitably provide the necessary setting for a direct confrontation that neither Michael nor Vanessa could possibly anticipate. As I meticulously prepared for the evening, carefully selecting a simple yet elegant outfit and gathering the crucial documentation I would undoubtedly require, I felt a strange and unexpected sense of profound calm. Despite the immense emotional magnitude of the events that were about to unfold, tucked safely inside my purse, I deliberately placed 3 significant items: the official formal notification detailing the specific changes made to the trust beneficiary designation, a collection of recent photographs of the cabin, clearly demonstrating my continuous and diligent maintenance efforts, and most significantly, the original deed definitively proving my uninterrupted ownership of the property across 4 long decades. These important papers collectively represented not merely the legal confirmation of property ownership, but the impending revelation of a fundamental truth that I had carefully protected for a period longer than my son had even been alive. Saturday evening eventually arrived, accompanied by perfectly pleasant spring weather, the kind that had consistently made the lake at Pine Ridge shimmer brilliantly, like highly polished glass. As I drove towards Michael's luxurious condominium unit, located in the exclusive River Point Tower, I meticulously rehearsed precisely what I would say when the pivotal moment finally arrived. Not harsh accusations or bitter recriminations, but simple, unadorned truths that had regrettably remained unspoken for far too long. When Michael greeted me at the door with a brief kiss that barely grazed my cheek, I immediately noticed that the formal dining table was meticulously set for precisely 3 people, and a bottle of exceedingly expensive champagne was actively chilling in a gleaming silver bucket. Whatever final wedding updates they had meticulously planned to share apparently warranted a celebratory atmosphere. Perhaps the official formalization of my complete exclusion had been deemed worthy of a celebratory toast. "Mom, you look quite nice tonight," Michael commented casually, his eyes briefly assessing my simple navy blue dress and classic pearl earrings. The subtle element of surprise evident in his tone strongly suggested he had anticipated less effort, yet another small but clear indication of just how completely he had fundamentally misunderstood precisely who I was and what core values I genuinely held dear. "Thank you very much," I replied with a genuinely warm smile that skillfully revealed absolutely nothing of my underlying purpose for being there. "I am genuinely looking forward to hearing all about your final wedding updates." As I took the seat generously offered to me at their elegant glass dining table, which afforded a truly spectacular panoramic view of the sparkling city lights below, I could not help but simultaneously think of the rough-hewn wooden table located at the cabin, where 4 distinct generations of our family had lovingly gathered over the years. The striking contrast between these two very different settings, one clearly designed primarily to impress visiting guests, the other specifically intended to nurture authentic connection, suddenly seemed to powerfully represent everything that had fundamentally gone wrong between my son and me over time. Vanessa gracefully appeared from the adjoining kitchen carrying an expertly arranged platter of appetizers that were clearly more decorative in appearance than truly substantial in quantity. "Eleanor, we are absolutely delighted that you could join us this evening," she stated with practiced charm that, regrettably, did not quite extend to her eyes. "We have some truly exciting new developments regarding the final wedding plans that we are eager to share." As she proceeded to pour the chilled champagne into delicate, slender flutes, I mentally prepared myself for the pivotal conversation that would undeniably change absolutely everything between us from that point forward. The cabin that I had diligently protected and preserved for 4 decades was on the verge of finally emerging from the shadows, compelling a long overdue and inevitable reckoning with the fundamental values that truly mattered in diligently creating a lasting legacy genuinely worth preserving for future generations. "A toast," Michael proudly declared, raising his champagne flute high as we comfortably settled ourselves at the dining table, offering its breathtaking panoramic view of the glittering city lights spread out far below, to all new beginnings and the cherished continuation of family traditions. The potent irony contained within his chosen words was certainly not lost on me, as I gently touched my glass delicately to theirs. Vanessa's fixed smile remained firmly in place as she took a delicate, tiny sip, her eyes already gleaming with the highly anticipated news they were clearly eager to share with me. "Mom." Michael began hesitantly, carefully setting down his glass, with a practiced precision that painfully reminded me of Richard. "We specifically wanted to speak with you regarding some necessary adjustments to our final wedding plans." I offered an encouraging nod, allowing them the space to proceed with the pre-prepared script they had clearly meticulously rehearsed. My own significant revelation could certainly wait until they had fully committed to delivering their own. "As you are undoubtedly aware, the exclusive resort located in Santorini is inherently private and intimate," he continued, following his script. "We have unfortunately had to make some genuinely difficult decisions regarding the final guest list in order to properly accommodate certain key business associates of Dad's who possess the potential to significantly open doors for my future professional career." Vanessa then leaned forward slightly, her expression a carefully studied blend of feigned concern and unwavering determination. "What Michael is attempting to convey, Eleanor, is that we have been compelled to reconsider some of the initial arrangements. The complex dynamics involving Richard's extended family and influential business connections create certain inherent complexities that we must address. You are effectively uninviting me from attending the wedding," I stated calmly and unequivocally, choosing to spare them the elaborate and lengthy justifications they had clearly prepared. Vanessa thoughtfully explained this precise situation to me during our lunch meeting last week. Michael's expression visibly flickered with genuine surprise before settling into something that was a difficult combination of embarrassment and evident relief. It is not a matter of formally uninviting you, Mom. It is fundamentally a matter of recognizing that the overall situation might unfortunately be inherently uncomfortable for absolutely everyone involved. We are genuinely thinking about your personal comfort level too, in this difficult decision. My comfort level, I repeated softly, allowing the words to hang in the air between us. Precisely, Vanessa quickly interjected, apparently completely missing the obvious skepticism present in my tone. Before she rapidly added, Dad has been actively working on something truly special. A genuine surprise, actually. We were not supposed to inform you about it just yet, but given the current circumstances... He briefly glanced at Vanessa, who offered an encouraging nod. Dad has successfully located our old family cabin situated at Pine Ridge. He announced confidently, his voice carrying the distinct satisfaction of someone delivering truly remarkable news. The specific one that was regrettably sold during your divorce proceedings. He is currently actively negotiating to purchase it, back as a significant wedding gift for us. Isn't that absolutely incredible? We are already planning to entirely rebuild it into a modern, luxurious lake house where we can collectively create entirely new family memories together in the future. Completely tear down the existing structure and build anew. Vanessa clarified eagerly, her excitement palpably evident. The current existing structure is undeniably charming, but unfortunately quite dated. We are actively collaborating with a highly specialized architect who focuses exclusively on designing opulent lake properties. I deliberately took a slow, measured sip of my champagne, using those precious seconds to carefully compose myself before formulating a response. The sheer audacity of their proposed plan, presented to me as a genuinely thoughtful gift, when they were quite literally planning to completely replace everything that my father had painstakingly built with his own hands, was truly breathtaking in its scope. That is certainly quite unexpected news. I managed to respond carefully, placing my glass gently back onto the table surface. May I politely inquire as to precisely when Richard initially discovered that this specific property was potentially available? Michael appeared momentarily confused by my specific focus on this seemingly minor detail. A few short months ago, I believe. He maintains extensive connections within the real estate industry, who are constantly on the lookout for potential opportunities. Why is that specific detail important? It is merely interesting timing, I observed calmly. And Richard is absolutely certain that this is indeed the very same property, the original family cabin. Absolutely, without a doubt, Michael confidently confirmed. He personally showed me the listing photographs. It looks exactly as I vividly recall it from my childhood days when I was very young, simply more weathered with time. The distinctive stone fireplace, the iconic green shutters. It is definitely our beloved old place. The interior space needs to be completely stripped bare and renovated, of course, Vanessa added with a dismissive wave of her hand. But the specific location is absolutely perfect. Private waterfront access, mature and beautiful trees. Once we completely replace the existing cabin structure with something much more suitable and contemporary, it will be absolutely incredible. I offered a thoughtful nod, my hand subtly moving towards my purse, where the crucial documents patiently awaited their moment. And this genuinely generous gift is this specifically intended as a form of consolation for my not attending your wedding. Michael at least possessed the minimal grace to appear genuinely uncomfortable. That is absolutely not how I would personally phrase it, Mom. It is fundamentally about proactively creating something positive and focusing firmly on the future rather than lingering on. Rather than focusing on my personal presence at my only child's wedding. I calmly completed the sentence for him. An undeniably awkward silence immediately descended upon the table. Vanessa actively busied herself unnecessarily, rearranging an already perfectly set place setting, while Michael visibly struggled with precisely how best to proceed with the conversation. Mom, he finally stated, his tone noticeably shifting to the patient voice one might unfortunately use when addressing a difficult or perceived unreasonable child. We are genuinely attempting to make the very best of what is undeniably a complicated and sensitive situation. Dad's extensive extended family will be present, his important business associates, Vanessa's influential family connections, all people who are fundamentally important to our future prospects. The potential for significant awkwardness is inherently considerable. More considerable than the significant absence of your own mother. I noted calmly, not posing a question, but simply making a straightforward statement regarding their apparent priorities. That is simply not fair in any way. Michael protested, a fleeting glimpse of the young boy I had lovingly raised momentarily visible beneath his polished adult exterior. We are genuinely offering a thoughtful alternative that simultaneously honors certain aspects of family legacy while effectively avoiding potential social complications entirely. The opportune moment had definitively arrived. I consciously reached into my purse and carefully removed the single envelope containing the crucial cabin documentation, placing it deliberately on the table surface directly between us. Before we engage in further discussion regarding any alternatives, I stated evenly, my voice steady, there is something critically important that you should both fully understand concerning the family cabin located at Pine Ridge. Michael's expression registered immediate confusion as I carefully slid the envelope closer towards him. What precisely about it? Please open this envelope, I instructed gently. He hesitated for a brief moment before reaching for the envelope, carefully removing the contents with the same meticulous precision that characterized so many of his deliberate movements. I now intently watched as he carefully examined the very first document, the original deed clearly showing the legal creation of the Eleanor Jameson Trust, specifically named using my maiden name, officially dated precisely 3 months prior to my divorce from Richard being formally finalized. His brow visibly furrowed deeply as he slowly turned to the second significant document, continuous and uninterrupted property tax receipts explicitly spanning 40 years, all consistently paid by the same established trust. The third critical document clearly displayed detailed records of regular maintenance expenses, a completely new roof installed in 1989, updated plumbing systems in 1998, necessary electrical work performed in 2007, all meticulously preserved within my personal records. Finally, he reached the collection of important photographs. Recent images clearly showcasing the cabin in absolutely excellent condition, with subtle yet evident signs of my continued presence. A book casually placed on the side table that I had been actively reading the previous summer. Freshly sewn curtains I had personally made to replace old ones damaged by sun exposure. The small garden shed that my father had originally built, now freshly repainted in the very same forest green color he had originally chosen. I truly do not fully comprehend, Michael stated, finally looking up from the documents, with genuine confusion evident in his eyes. These records look like... Mom, are you genuinely asserting that you have continuously owned the cabin this entire extended time?" "Yes, that is precisely correct," I confirmed, simply allowing the full weight of the statement to settle. "I never lost ownership of it during the divorce proceedings. I strategically created a private legal trust specifically to protect and safeguard it before the divorce actions even officially commenced. For 40 years straight, I have diligently maintained it, carefully preserved it, and conscientiously kept it exactly as your grandfather originally built it all, while consciously allowing you and your father to genuinely believe it had been permanently sold years ago." Vanessa's champagne glass uncontrollably slipped from her trembling fingers, shattering loudly on the polished marble floor surface. Neither Michael nor I made any move whatsoever to clean up the resulting mess, as she stared at me with openly undisguised shock and disbelief. "That is simply not physically possible," Michael insisted firmly, anxiously shuffling through the documents, once again as if desperately searching for some piece of evidence that would definitively disprove my astonishing claim. Dad explicitly said it was permanently sold as an integral part of the divorce settlement. He has genuinely been actively negotiating to buy it back recently. Your father successfully discovered the existence of the trust approximately 6 months ago. I calmly explained, my voice steady. His extensive real estate connections likely noticed the significant similarity between the formal trust name and my personal maiden name. Rather than directly approaching me about it, he apparently meticulously developed this elaborate plan to recover it as a grand performative gesture naturally, after completely tearing down everything that your grandfather painstakingly built, with his own hands, of course. Michael's expression rapidly cycled through phases of initial confusion, outright disbelief, and finally the dawning and painful realization that absolutely everything he had genuinely believed about the cabin, and perhaps about me, personally, had been fundamentally built upon a foundation of assumptions that were now rapidly crumbling around him. "Why would you deliberately keep this from me?" he asked, his voice barely above a strained whisper. "All these past years, why did you never choose to tell me?" It was precisely the question I had anticipated and mentally prepared for, the specific one I had spent countless sleepless nights contemplating how to effectively answer. Yet now, directly facing my son across a dining table, liberally scattered with undeniable evidence of my decades-long carefully maintained deception, I found myself momentarily searching for precisely the right words to articulate my complex motivations. Initially, it was purely about necessary protection. I began carefully choosing each word, deliberately. The cabin represented my family's enduring legacy, something incredibly important that your grandfather personally built with his own skilled hands. The divorce was undeniably bitter and contentious, and your father's highly aggressive legal team was absolutely determined to claim every single asset of significant value. Strategically creating the trust was quite literally the only viable way to genuinely preserve what held the absolute most importance to me at that difficult time. The directness of her question cut through the emotional weight of the moment. I reached back into my purse and carefully withdrew the final critical document, the formal trust modification I had officially signed in Sarah's professional office. My original and long-held intention was to ultimately leave the cabin directly to Michael. I explained, calmly placing the important document onto the table surface. For 40 continuous years, the trust documents have explicitly specified that upon my eventual death, legal ownership would formally transfer directly to my son. Michael's expression softened slightly at this particular revelation. And now, I continued, my voice unwavering, despite the significant weight of this monumental decision. Now I have officially amended the terms of the trust. My voice remained remarkably steady despite the profound emotional impact of this crucial decision. In light of recent significant events, specifically including being explicitly informed that I am not genuinely welcome at my only child's upcoming wedding ceremony, I have formally designated the Pine Ridge Environmental Conservancy as the designated beneficiary instead. The cabin structure and the associated land will be permanently preserved in perpetuity, definitively ensuring it will never be extensively developed or significantly altered from your grandfather's original and cherished design. The silence that immediately followed was both profound and deafening. Vanessa stared intently at the shattered glass fragments on the floor, as if suddenly seeing a powerful metaphor for the carefully constructed plans that had just dramatically disintegrated before her eyes. Michael continued to tightly hold the photographs in his hands, his thumbs unconsciously tracing the familiar outlines of the cabin, where he had spent his very earliest and seemingly long-forgotten summers. "You are deliberately punishing me," he finally stated, a subtle edge of Richard's familiar sense of entitlement unmistakably creeping into his voice. "Simply because we requested a minor wedding accommodation, you are purposefully taking away a significant family legacy." "No, Michael," I calmly replied steadfastly, maintaining my composure although my heart ached deeply at his self-serving interpretation of my actions. "I am merely acknowledging that we currently hold fundamentally different values regarding what genuine family truly means. If my presence is not considered sufficiently important to genuinely include in your wedding day, then perhaps my family's enduring legacy is similarly not considered sufficiently important to genuinely include in your perceived future. That is openly manipulative behavior," Vanessa interjected assertively, seemingly finding her voice again amidst the shock. "You are deliberately using this valuable property as leverage to forcefully insert yourself into our wedding celebration." I calmly turned my gaze directly towards her with a profound sense of tranquility that originated from absolute clarity of purpose. "I am not forcing anything whatsoever, Vanessa. I am simply making necessary and informed decisions regarding property that I have diligently maintained and preserved for 40 long years based directly on the values explicitly demonstrated by the individuals currently involved in this situation. You have undeniably made your definitive choice regarding my appropriate place in your significant celebration. I have consequently made my own definitive choice regarding the future direction of my family's cherished legacy." Michael abruptly stood up from the table, pacing towards the expansive floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the impressive city lights twinkling far below. When he turned back towards me, his expression had distinctly hardened into something eerily reminiscent of Richard during our difficult divorce proceedings, calculating, intently assessing relative leverage and power. "We can certainly legally challenge this," he stated flatly, his voice carrying a clear implicit threat. "The deliberate deception maintained over decades, the strategically hidden asset during the divorce negotiations. Dad's highly skilled attorneys would undoubtedly have a field day with this entire complex situation." The thinly veiled legal threat might have wounded me deeply had I not fully anticipated its likely occurrence. The trust was definitively and legally created prior to the formal commencement of the divorce proceedings. I calmly explained, my voice completely steady. "Your father's attorneys are certainly welcome to attempt to challenge its validity, but Sarah Thompson has meticulously maintained impeccable legal records for 40 continuous years, She is currently a highly respected senior partner at Jacobson and Reed, a prominent law firm specializing specifically in complex trust law. The mere mention of one of the city's most prestigious and influential law firms caused Michael to visibly pause and reconsider his impulsive statement. While Richard certainly possessed valuable connections, Sarah's unparalleled legal expertise in this highly specialized area would render any attempted legal challenge exceedingly difficult and potentially highly embarrassing for him. There is one specific element of the formal amendment that might potentially interest you. I continued calmly when neither Michael nor Vanessa offered any verbal response. The legal transfer of the property to the Conservancy organization does not become irrevocably binding until either my unfortunate death or 1 full year from today's date, whichever event occurs later in time. That particular provision creates a potential window of opportunity, a full year during which perspectives might realistically evolve, and previous choices might be genuinely reconsidered. A full year for us to completely change our established wedding plans, you mean? Vanessa clarified sharply, her tone undeniably bitter. Or risk permanently losing the property forever. A full year for you to genuinely reflect on what authentic family truly means. I gently corrected, my voice soft but firm. On both sides of the relationship, I have diligently maintained this cabin structure for 40 continuous years, not strategically as a bargaining chip, but purely as a genuine labor of profound love, carefully preserving something invaluable that was lovingly created by my own father for future generations. If that potential future no longer genuinely includes me at significant and meaningful family moments, perhaps the inherent legacy should consequently follow a distinctly different path entirely. Michael slowly returned to the table, sitting down heavily in his chair. I sincerely need some time to fully process all of this information. He stated, his voice noticeably strained and filled with emotion. Discovering that my own mother has secretly owned property for decades, that my father apparently lied about actively buying it back, that you are now seemingly threatening to donate it away permanently. It is genuinely a significant amount of information to attempt to absorb all at once. Of course, I understand. I agreed carefully, gathering my personal belongings and rising from the table. Please take whatever amount of time you sincerely feel you need to process this. The formal amendment is officially dated today, so the specified 1-year window has only just recently commenced. Regardless of what you ultimately decide to do, I genuinely want you to understand that every single board, every single nail, every single stone meticulously incorporated into that cabin has been diligently preserved and maintained exactly as your grandfather originally constructed it, purely out of profound love for a deeply cherished family legacy that I sincerely hoped would proudly continue. As I moved deliberately towards the apartment door, Vanessa remained completely frozen in place beside the scattered, shattered glass, her meticulously constructed plans now appearing just as fragmented and broken as the crystal shards lying on the floor. Michael slowly followed me to the entryway of the apartment, his expression a complex and difficult mixture of initial anger, profound confusion, and something that might potentially have been a flicker of genuine respect. I honestly never truly knew you possessed this capacity within you, Mom, he stated quietly, holding the door open slightly for me. This specific level of careful calculation and long-term planning. I paused for a brief moment, looking directly and intently into the eyes of the son I had lovingly raised entirely on my own discerning subtle glimpses of the young boy he had once been, beneath the surface of the man Richard had significantly shaped him to become. There is a great deal of things you genuinely do not know about me, Michael. I replied with a sad and knowing smile. Perhaps that is the true underlying tragedy in this entire complex situation that you unfortunately never once thought to truly ask. The contemplative drive home through the darkened city streets afforded me the necessary time to fully process the intense confrontation that had just occurred. The specific look on Michael's face at the precise moment he realized I still legitimately owned the cabin would indeed remain indelibly etched in my memory forever. Not as a personal triumph for me, but rather as the pivotal moment when my son finally, genuinely perceived me as something far more significant than the limited and simplistic character he had previously constructed within his own mind. Whether this profound revelation would ultimately lead to genuine reconciliation or regrettable permanent estrangement remained undeniably uncertain. But for the very first time in decades, our fundamental relationship would courageously proceed from a genuine place of undeniable truth rather than comfortable and long-held fictions, however painful and difficult that truth might ultimately prove to be. As I slowly pulled into my home's driveway, my phone chimed softly, indicating the arrival of a text message from Sarah. "How did everything go?" The message simply read. I sat quietly for a moment in the stillness of the car, carefully considering precisely how best to concisely summarize a profound encounter that had effectively shattered 40 long years of carefully maintained illusions. Finally, after a period of thoughtful reflection, I typed out my response and sent it. The cabin has finally emerged from the shadows now, and so have I. The entire week immediately following my significant revelation at Michael and Vanessa's condominium unit passed in a complete and unsettling silence. There were absolutely no incoming calls, no text messages, just the hollow and pervasive quietness characteristic of relationships undergoing a profound crisis. I conscientiously moved through my daily routines with a veneer of outward calm, diligently continuing my volunteer work at the local library and meticulously tending to my small garden while inwardly grappling with the deeply unsettling question of whether I had, in my unwavering determination, to be finally recognized as a complete person, inadvertently and irrevocably destroyed my fundamental relationship with my only beloved child. Then, precisely 10 days subsequent to our intense confrontation, a text message surprisingly appeared from a completely unexpected source. "Eleanor, this is Vanessa. I would sincerely like to speak with you privately, if possible. Could we meet for coffee tomorrow morning at the Riverside Cafe at 10:00 a.m.? The message was so genuinely unexpected that I reread it a total of 3 times before responding with a simple affirmative agreement. What conceivable reason could Vanessa possibly have for wanting to discuss matters privately without Michael present? Was this potentially a genuine peace offering, or perhaps another carefully calculated attempt to negotiate my eventual exclusion from their upcoming wedding under a new set of different terms? The Riverside Cafe served as a strategically neutral territory, being neither the type of opulent establishment Vanessa typically frequented, nor the cozy, familiar neighborhood spots I personally preferred. When I arrived the following morning, I immediately spotted her seated at a corner table, dressed notably more casually than I had ever previously seen her, wearing jeans and a simple blouse, her usual meticulously applied makeup noticeably absent. "Thank you genuinely for coming to meet me," she said softly, as I carefully took the seat directly across from her. The practiced charm and polished demeanor that usually characterized our interactions were notably missing, replaced by something that looked surprisingly like genuine vulnerability. "Of course I am happy to meet," I replied calmly, carefully, observing her with a sense of genuine curiosity. "Is Michael planning on joining us?" "No, he is not," she answered quickly, her voice slightly strained. "He is not aware that I am here meeting with you. Following what transpired during our last meeting, we have been engaging in some incredibly difficult and challenging conversations privately." She nervously fidgeted with her coffee cup, clearly appearing uncomfortable. "I felt a sincere need to speak with you openly, woman to woman, without Michael's own perspective potentially influencing the conversation." I calmly nodded in understanding, patiently waiting for her to continue speaking. "Firstly, I sincerely want to offer you a genuine apology for precisely how I mishandled the entire wedding situation." Vanessa began the words, seemingly requiring noticeable effort to articulate. "Uninviting you through that rather impersonal lunch invitation was undeniably cowardly and exceptionally cruel. I should have undeniably pushed back much harder when Richard specifically suggested it would be cleaner if you were not present at the event. This candid admission genuinely surprised me. Richard specifically suggested that I should not attend." Vanessa nodded slowly, a fleeting spark of anger crossing her face. "He framed the suggestion as simply being concerned for everyone's collective comfort. But upon reflection now, I should have thoroughly questioned his underlying motives much more critically, especially now that I fully comprehend the entire situation regarding the cabin." She took a deep, steadying breath before continuing. "The fundamental truth is, Eleanor, I have been raised and conditioned within a world where outward appearances matter above absolutely everything else. My parents' entire social existence revolves rigidly around who is invited to which specific event, who is strategically seated at which table, and which influential connections can be most effectively leveraged for personal advantage. When Richard raised his specific concerns about potential awkwardness at the wedding, it immediately triggered all of my deeply ingrained conditioning regarding the absolute necessity of maintaining social harmony at the expense of genuine personal relationships. It was arguably the most honest and genuine statement I had ever heard her utter. The meticulously constructed facade she typically presented had finally visibly cracked, revealing something far more complex and multifaceted, lying just beneath the surface. "After you departed that evening," she continued, her voice softer, "Michael and I engaged in the very first truly significant argument of our entire relationship. He was profoundly angry about the cabin, about being deliberately denied what he perceived as his rightful inheritance. But when I gently suggested that we could potentially utilize the specified 1-year window to simply include you in the wedding celebration and subsequently secure the property for ourselves, he became even more visibly upset and agitated. This particular reaction from Michael genuinely surprised me. He did not want to reconsider the established wedding arrangements. That is precisely what shocked me the most as well," Vanessa readily admitted. "He explicitly stated, this situation is absolutely no longer simply about the damn cabin itself. It is fundamentally about the undeniable fact that my own mother has been actively living a completely different life than I genuinely believed for 40 long years. It is about the crucial fact that the seemingly modest, simple woman I have consistently dismissed as being naive and limited in scope has in reality been expertly executing a sophisticated legal and financial strategy since before I was even born into existence." Hearing my own son's words quoted back to me in this context created a complex and layered emotional response within me. Pain stemming from his evident anger, but concurrently, a powerful glimmer of something akin to profound hope that he was finally beginning to genuinely see me as a complete and complex individual, rather than merely a convenient and easily dismissed caricature. "What specifically happened subsequent to that?" I inquired quietly, my voice barely audible. I directly asked him whether he was more profoundly upset about being deliberately excluded from your carefully guarded secret, or about the specific prospect of not ultimately acquiring the property. Vanessa stated, her eyes meeting mine with unwavering directness. His subsequent answer made me deeply realize that I do not in fact know the man I am actively planning to marry as thoroughly and intimately as I had previously believed. She paused, deliberately, visibly struggling with whether to reveal something deeply personal and revealing. My father meticulously built his expansive real estate empire by consistently prioritizing business connections and strategic advantage over genuine family relationships at virtually every opportunity. My mother, in contrast, has spent 40 continuous years systematically arranging her entire personal existence rigidly around his specific preferences and social ambitions. When Michael was unable to immediately and unequivocally answer whether he genuinely valued you more than the property itself, I clearly witnessed my own parents' marriage explicitly reflected back at me in that moment, and it absolutely terrified me to my core. The raw honesty and vulnerability of this particular confession created a completely unexpected opening between us, a brief but significant moment of genuine human connection, completely devoid of the layers of social positioning and strategic maneuvering that had previously characterized our interactions. The cabin represents far more than just a mere piece of property to me, Vanessa. I explained, gently choosing my words carefully. It is the tangible physical embodiment of my own father's deep and enduring love of personal sacrifice, extending across multiple generations. Every single summer I have deliberately spent there entirely alone. While Michael was physically with Richard in Europe, I have diligently maintained it with the persistent hope that someday my future grandchildren would come to know their great-grandfather through the very home that he personally built with his own hands. I genuinely understand that truth now, Vanessa stated, surprising me once again with her sudden depth of perception. After you left our apartment that evening, I remained awake throughout the entire night, meticulously examining those photographs you thoughtfully brought with you. The evident care and meticulous attention to detail in every single aspect, the careful preservation of something authentically meaningful and enduring. It represents the precise antithesis of the disposable luxury lifestyle I have been deliberately raised to value above all else. She hesitated briefly before adding softly, I sincerely believe that I genuinely want more of what you fundamentally value in my own life, and significantly less of what my parents have consistently taught me truly matters. This profound and candid admission hung powerfully between us, creating a moment of completely unexpected and genuine connection. For the very first time, I was truly seeing beyond the polished and carefully constructed surface to the complex woman residing underneath, someone potentially far more intricate and thoughtful than I had previously given her any credit for being. I have consequently made a firm decision, Vanessa continued after a significant pause, her voice unwavering. Regardless of whether Michael ultimately agrees or not, I am absolutely not going to proceed with having a wedding ceremony where his mother is not genuinely welcome and actively included. I have already personally contacted the resort management in Santorini to formally cancel our entire reservation. You have canceled the wedding entirely? I asked, momentarily startled and genuinely alarmed that my actions might have precipitated such a drastic and far-reaching response. Not the marriage itself, she clarified quickly, reassuringly. Just the elaborate and overly extravagant destination event involving all of Richard's extensive business connections. If Michael sincerely still wishes to marry me, we will undeniably need to create something fundamentally different, something that authentically honors genuine family connections, rather than merely leveraging strategic business opportunities. The sheer courage that this particular decision must have undeniably required from someone raised in Vanessa's specific world profoundly impressed me. For an individual accustomed to the rigid expectations of her social circle canceling a highly anticipated and elaborate society wedding represented a genuine and significant risk, potential social embarrassment among her peers, palpable parental disappointment, and undoubtedly widespread commentary from their entire social circle. How precisely did Michael react to this significant decision? I asked, genuinely attempting to gauge my son's current emotional state and position in this completely unexpected development. I have not yet formally informed him, Vanessa admitted candidly. We have been carefully circling each other somewhat cautiously since your recent revelation. He has been actively speaking with Richard almost daily, which genuinely concerns me, given what we now understand about the elaborate cabin deception. Richard will undoubtedly be strongly encouraging him to legally challenge the trust amendment. I observed, readily understanding my ex-husband's probable and predictable strategy. Vanessa nodded in agreement. Almost certainly yes, but I sincerely believe there is something else more profound occurring as well. Michael has spent his entire adult life diligently attempting to earn his father's explicit approval by rigidly adopting his values and perspectives. Your recent revelation has created the very first serious and undeniable crack in that carefully constructed foundation. He is actively questioning core beliefs and truths that he has accepted unquestioningly for decades. As we prepared to conclude our meeting and depart, Vanessa hesitated briefly before asking one final crucial question. Would you be willing to personally show me the cabin? Not Michael just yet, just me privately. I sincerely wish to truly understand what you have diligently preserved for so long before I attempt to help him genuinely see its inherent value. The request, though unexpected, felt profoundly genuine and sincere. Yes, I would be willing. I agreed after a moment of careful consideration. I sincerely believe that would constitute a genuinely good initial step forward. As we mutually parted ways outside the cafe entrance, Vanessa surprisingly offered me a brief but noticeably sincere hug. Thank you profoundly for meeting with me today, she stated, her voice filled with emotion. And thank you for diligently maintaining that cabin structure all these past years. Regardless of what ultimately transpires with the trust amendment, I am genuinely grateful to truly understand the type of compassionate and dedicated woman my future children might potentially have as a grandmother someday. The unexpected comment caught me completely off guard. This was the very first explicit mention of potential grandchildren, a future possibility I had sadly begun to genuinely fear might never actually include me. The mere thought that Vanessa was seriously considering my potential role in the lives of their future children strongly suggested a significant and positive shift in her perspective that I had frankly not dared to genuinely hope for following the painful wedding exclusion. Driving home, I spent time reflecting on precisely how completely this meeting had successfully upended my previous assumptions and preconceptions regarding Vanessa. I had previously characterized her negatively in my internal narrative as the quintessential social climbing fiancé who viewed me merely as an inconvenient and embarrassing reminder of Michael's supposedly less sophisticated and humble origins. The reality now appeared far more complex and nuanced a young woman who had indeed been raised within a privileged world, prioritizing appearance over genuine substance, but who might potentially possess a greater capacity for personal growth and honest self-reflection than I had previously given her any genuine credit for. Whether this completely unexpected alliance would ultimately lead to genuine and lasting reconciliation with Michael himself remained undeniably uncertain. But for the very first time since the painful wedding exclusion, I experienced a tangible glimmer of hope that something authentically meaningful might successfully emerge from the difficult and painful truths that had now been courageously exposed, not solely concerning the physical cabin structure, but more fundamentally about the core values that would ultimately shape the future of our family. 3 days subsequent to my illuminating coffee meeting with Vanessa, I drove to Pine Ridge with her seated beside me in the passenger seat. The journey itself felt profoundly symbolic, traversing the considerable distance between my carefully hidden past and an undeniably uncertain future. Vanessa had remained uncharacteristically quiet for the majority of the drive, attentively watching the urban landscape gradually transition into rolling countryside and eventually the dense pine forests that gave the lake region its characteristic name. "It is truly beautiful here," she quietly observed as we turned onto the unpaved road leading directly to the cabin. So remarkably different from the overly manicured country club properties my parents typically preferred. My father specifically chose this precise location quite deliberately. I explained, expertly navigating the familiar curves with practiced ease. He sincerely desired a place that felt genuinely removed from the artificial aspects of the outside world, a location that genuinely required you to adapt and coexist with nature, rather than deliberately attempting to bend nature to suit purely human preferences. As we rounded the final bend in the road and the cabin structure itself came fully into view, I distinctly heard Vanessa's soft, audible intake of breath. The late afternoon sunlight filtered gently through the towering pine trees, casting beautiful dappled shadows across the weathered cedar siding and the familiar forest green shutters. Wildflowers grew naturally along the stone path that my father had meticulously laid by hand many years ago, their vibrant colors providing a beautiful contrast against the natural landscape. "The photographs you showed me did not genuinely do it full justice," Vanessa murmured softly as we parked the car. "It feels profoundly sacred somehow." Her chosen word genuinely surprised me. The term sacred was certainly not a word I would have anticipated using from the practical, status-conscious woman I had initially assumed Vanessa to be. Yet the word perfectly captured precisely what this particular place had genuinely meant to my family across multiple generations. As I slowly unlocked the cabin door, I experienced a momentary sense of hesitation. For 40 continuous years, this personal space had served as my private sanctuary, the single place where I maintained complete and absolute control over my immediate environment and my cherished memories. Allowing Vanessa entry inside represented a level of personal vulnerability I had honestly not fully anticipated when initially agreeing to this specific visit. My father personally constructed the majority of this cabin using his own hands. I explained as we stepped together into the main room with its impressive soaring ceiling and large stone fireplace. He was a skilled construction foreman by professional trade, but this particular place represented his own deeply personal masterpiece. Vanessa moved thoughtfully through the living space with an unexpected and profound sense of reverence, her fingers gently tracing the rough texture of the hand-hewn beams, her eyes carefully taking in specific details that most casual visitors might easily overlook the precise and careful joinery of the wooden mantelpiece, the subtle and beautiful pattern intentionally created in the stone hearth, the deliberate way each window had been specifically positioned to perfectly capture a distinct and beautiful view of the lake or the surrounding forest. You can genuinely feel the clear intention embedded in absolutely everything here, she quietly observed. Nothing whatsoever feels random or carelessly placed. I nodded in agreement, unexpectedly moved by her genuine perception and understanding. That was precisely my father's core philosophy. He sincerely believed that the spaces we inhabit fundamentally shape the way we genuinely live within them, that a thoughtfully and intentionally created home inherently encourages a thoughtful and meaningful way of living. We continued our exploration through the cabin, with me sharing meaningful stories intrinsically connected to different spaces. The kitchen area where my grandmother had patiently taught me how to expertly bake her famously delicious blackberry pies. The quiet reading nook where my mother had spent countless happy hours, engrossed with her beloved collection of poetry books. The screened porch where my father and I had engaged in marathon games of chess during intense summer thunderstorms. When we reached the small bedroom that had specifically been Michael's during our family summers at the cabin, Vanessa paused thoughtfully at the bookshelf that was still lined with adventure novels and nature field guides from his childhood years. He never once mentioned any of this specific history, she stated, gently lifting a worn copy of Hatchet that had clearly been Michael's favorite book at the age of 10. The way he spoke about his childhood experiences, I genuinely assumed there were absolutely no happy or positive memories whatsoever from the years before his teenage years spent actively with Richard. There were many profoundly happy and positive times. I gently corrected her, wanting to ensure she had a complete picture. But I sincerely believe that when Michael consciously chose to primarily align himself with Richard's particular values and perspective, it subsequently became significantly easier for him to simply minimize or dismiss those earlier memories rather than attempting to genuinely reconcile them with the specific path he had consciously chosen for himself as an adult. Vanessa carefully replaced the book back onto the shelf, her expression deeply thoughtful. It is as though he intentionally created a narrative in his mind where his real and significant life only genuinely began when Richard started taking a much more active role in his life during his teenage years, and absolutely everything that happened before that was merely considered prologue or insignificant preparation. Precisely, I agreed, struck by her insightful observation. And within that particular narrative he constructed, I unfortunately became relegated to merely a supporting character, rather than being fully recognized as a complete person possessing my own significant and independent story. We concluded our extensive tour seated together side by side on the dock, extending out into the tranquil lake, patiently watching as the afternoon seamlessly transitioned towards evening, the water's surface gradually turning a beautiful golden hue as it reflected the setting sun. In the far distance, a pair of loons called out to each other, their distinctively haunting cries echoing across the serene water. "I genuinely understand now," Vanessa stated, finally softly breaking a comfortable and lengthy silence. "Why you diligently preserved this specific place for so long, why it holds such immense importance for you. It is far more than just a simple piece of property. It is the tangible physical embodiment of your family's deeply held values and rich history." Yes, that is absolutely correct. I confirmed, genuinely grateful for her newfound understanding and insight. Every single board, every single stone, meticulously incorporated here, genuinely represents my father's fundamental belief that actively creating something of truly lasting quality and enduring value matters infinitely more than pursuing momentary convenience or succumbing to fleeting trends. Vanessa deliberately turned to face me directly, her expression appearing more genuinely serious than I had ever previously witnessed it. I sincerely need to share something crucially important with you. Following our coffee meeting, I made the decision to personally visit Richard. This particular admission caught me entirely off guard and completely surprised me. You visited Richard for what specific reason? I sincerely needed to understand his specific perspective on the situation. She explained, her voice firm, to directly hear from him precisely why he deliberately lied about the cabin allegedly being sold, why he claimed to be actively negotiating to repurchase property he undoubtedly knew you still legitimately owned. The mere thought of Vanessa personally confronting Richard, a man whose carefully cultivated, calculating charm had successfully intimidated individuals far more experienced and assertive than herself, both concerned and profoundly impressed me simultaneously. What precisely did he say to you? I asked, genuinely curious about how this unexpected confrontation had unfolded, and concluded. He was visibly surprised to see me arrive completely alone, of course. Vanessa began, a subtle hint of satisfaction present in her tone. Initially, he attempted to dismiss my specific questions, suggesting that I simply did not fully understand the complex intricacies of the overall situation. When I persistently pressed him further, he defensively claimed he was merely attempting to proactively create a positive and mutually beneficial outcome for absolutely everyone involved, successfully recovering the property as a grand gesture of supposed goodwill, and then subsequently creating a modern, luxurious lake house that the entire extended family could collectively enjoy. And you simply did not believe his explanation, I observed, calmly, hearing the clear skepticism present in her voice. No, I absolutely did not, she confirmed definitively, especially when I specifically asked him why he did not simply directly approach you once he discovered the existence of the trust. His response was genuinely revealing. He explicitly stated that you would have undoubtedly complicated matters with sentimentality, and defensively claimed that the existing structure was inherently worthless, except purely for the land it occupies. His dismissive attitude towards my father's skilled craftsmanship, labeling it as worthless, stung deeply, even after 40 years definitively confirming that Richard remained fundamentally the same individual who had never genuinely valued anything beyond its pure monetary worth or potential for enhancing social status. What precisely happened subsequent to that? I asked, increasingly curious about how this entirely unexpected confrontation had ultimately concluded. I calmly informed him that I had personally seen the cabin with my own eyes. Vanessa stated, a new sense of confidence evident in her voice, that I genuinely understood now what genuine quality craftsmanship and authentic heritage truly meant, in stark contrast to the disposable luxury lifestyle he had consistently and exclusively pursued throughout his life. Her expression, she momentarily paused, searching for the precise words to accurately describe it. It was precisely like observing someone suddenly realize they had fundamentally misread a situation they firmly believed they were in complete control of. The visual image she conjured brought an unexpected and genuine smile to my face. Richard rarely encountered direct and unwavering challenges to his meticulously calculated manipulations, particularly from individuals he implicitly assumed were fully aligned with his own values and interests. Before I ultimately departed, Vanessa continued, her voice growing more serious. He explicitly stated something that I sincerely believe you should be fully aware of. He strongly implied that Michael would eventually see reason and consequently legally challenge the trust amendment, asserting that he would personally ensure his son did not allow sentimentality to improperly interfere with claiming what he believed rightfully belonged to him. This particular revelation, while undeniably concerning, was honestly not at all surprising to me. Richard had always demonstrably excelled at strategically positioning himself as the voice of pure rationality against what he consistently framed as emotional and irrational female decision-making. The fact that he would attempt to deliberately drive a legal wedge between Michael and myself was entirely consistent with his established character and past behavior. Has Michael made any explicit mention of considering legal challenges to you? I inquired carefully, choosing my words deliberately. Not directly to me, no, Vanessa candidly admitted. But he has been notably withdrawn and preoccupied, spending unusually long hours at his office and taking numerous private phone calls that I strongly suspect are with Richard or potentially his legal team. I am genuinely concerned about the considerable influence Richard still undeniably holds over him. We sat together in thoughtful silence as the sun continued to dip lower on the horizon, painting the surface of the lake with deeper, richer golds and ambers. A fish suddenly jumped nearby, creating expanding ripples that spread in perfect circles across the perfectly still water. What precisely would it ultimately take? Vanessa asked, finally thoughtfully breaking the silence. For you to seriously consider reversing the trust amendment. Not solely regarding the specific wedding situation, but more fundamentally what would fundamentally need to change within your overall relationship with Michael himself. It was precisely the same fundamental question I had been consistently asking myself inwardly since that challenging and confrontational dinner. What did I genuinely and truly desire beyond simply being graciously included in my son's eventual wedding day? Genuine recognition. I stated after a period of careful and deliberate consideration. Not merely legal recognition of my undeniable right to this property, but more importantly, genuine recognition of my existence as a complete and complex individual with my own significant and independent life story, my own substantial accomplishments, and my own deeply held values. For 40 long years, I have been regrettably reduced to merely a convenient character within Michael's own constructed narrative, the seemingly simple-minded mother who was perceived as requiring his guidance and protection. I sincerely need him to genuinely see me precisely as I actually am, not merely as the convenient and simplistic fiction he deliberately created to align seamlessly with Richard's particular world and perspective. Vanessa nodded slowly in understanding. That makes complete and perfect sense to me. And having personally seen this unique place with my own eyes, having genuinely understood precisely what you have so diligently preserved all these passing years, I sincerely believe that Michael also genuinely needs to see it as well. Not just the physical property itself, but the undeniable truth of precisely who his mother authentically is. 3 full days subsequently passed, with absolutely no communication whatsoever from either Michael or Vanessa. I conscientiously attempted to focus on my established daily routines, volunteering at the local library, diligently tending to my small garden, and attending scheduled meetings with my retired teacher's book club, but found myself constantly and compulsively checking my phone with increasing frequency, desperately hoping for some tangible indication that Vanessa had somehow succeeded in effectively reaching through to my son. On the 4th day, as evening began to descend, a text message surprisingly appeared on my phone from a completely unexpected source. "Mom, it's Michael. Can we please talk? I am currently parked outside your house right now." My heart immediately raced as I quickly looked through the front window of my home. Sure enough, Michael's sleek black car was indeed parked directly at the curb, and he was seated inside, seemingly gathering his thoughts and courage before approaching the front door. I took a deep, steadying breath, smoothed down my hair, and opened the door just before he had a chance to knock. "Michael," I stated simply, my voice managing to remain steadier than I inwardly felt. He stood on my front porch area looking notably uncharacteristically disheveled. His usually impeccable appearance showed clear signs of strain and stress. His tie was noticeably loosened. His hair appeared slightly rumpled and prominent. Dark circles beneath his eyes strongly suggested he had endured sleepless nights. "May I please come inside and speak with you?" he asked softly, his voice carrying absolutely none of the confident authority I had unfortunately grown accustomed to hearing from him over the years. I quietly stepped aside wordlessly, granting him permission to enter the modest home where he had spent his childhood, but which he now rarely visited. He entered the living room space and stood awkwardly for a moment, as though genuinely seeing the familiar space through entirely new eyes, carefully noting the handcrafted bookshelf my father had personally built years ago, the beautiful quilt my grandmother had meticulously made draped across the sofa, and the vibrant watercolor painting of Pine Ridge Lake hanging prominently above the fireplace mantel. "Vanessa personally informed me that she visited the cabin with you recently." He began his gaze, still slowly moving around the room, as though meticulously cataloging previously unnoticed details. "She described it quite differently than I specifically remembered it from my childhood. It has been meticulously maintained and preserved exactly as it was originally," I replied, my voice gentle, though perhaps she perceived it with entirely different eyes than the young child you were when you last visited the property. Michael nodded slowly in understanding. "She explicitly stated that the visit significantly helped her to understand you far better, that there was considerably more to the complete story than either of us had previously recognized." I gently gestured towards the sofa, and we both cautiously sat down, deliberately maintaining a careful physical distance between us. This was the closest physical proximity we had shared since the intense and confrontational dinner where I had finally revealed my decades-long, carefully guarded secret. "I have been actively meeting with Dad and his legal team," Michael continued after a palpable moment of silence. "They genuinely believe we possess sufficient grounds to legally challenge the validity of the trust amendment, based upon the alleged deception perpetrated during the divorce proceedings many years ago." Although the word deception stung deeply, I was honestly not at all surprised by this information. I fully expected as much from them. That is precisely what I initially intended to pursue, legally. He admitted candidly. I was undeniably angry, in fact, genuinely furious that you had successfully hidden this significant information from me for literally decades, that you were seemingly using it as strategic leverage to forcefully insert yourself into our established wedding plans. I started to gently object to this particular characterization of my motives, but he respectfully held up his hand, signaling me to pause. "Please, Mom, allow me to fully finish what I need to say. That is precisely how I initially perceived the situation. But something critically important that Vanessa explicitly stated after personally visiting the cabin profoundly caused me to pause and meticulously reconsider absolutely everything I had previously believed. What precisely was that crucial statement? I asked, genuinely curious about what specific insight could have potentially penetrated the carefully constructed narrative that Richard was undoubtedly actively promoting. She simply asked me a straightforward question. Why would your mother meticulously maintain that cabin perfectly for 40 long years if she never genuinely intended for you to ultimately have it? It was not a question framed in terms of legal rights or purely financial calculation. It was fundamentally about underlying motivation, about intentions extending across decades. It was a remarkably perceptive and emotionally intelligent question that directly addressed the core of the matter, revealing a depth of insight from Vanessa that genuinely surprised me. I honestly did not possess a compelling or satisfactory answer. Michael continued, his voice tinged with vulnerability. Dad's attorneys consistently focused on hidden assets and intricate legal technicalities, but they simply could not adequately explain why you would diligently preserve a significant family property for 40 continuous years only to abruptly change the intended inheritance plan now. It fundamentally did not align logically with the specific narrative they were actively attempting to construct regarding your underlying motives. He paused again, clearly struggling to articulate his next complex thoughts. So, I consequently began actively asking different types of questions, not solely about the purely legal aspects of the situation, but specifically about you, about the mother I genuinely believed I knew versus the strong and complex woman who had expertly executed a sophisticated legal strategy even before I was actually born. This fundamental shift in his perspective, moving from perceiving me purely as a legal adversary to finally recognizing me as a complex and complete person with my own valid and significant narrative, represented the crucial first step towards precisely what I had most deeply desired: genuine and authentic recognition. Dad was unable to adequately answer those fundamental questions. Michael candidly admitted, or perhaps simply chose not to. He consistently attempted to steer the conversation back towards property values and intricate legal strategies. But Vanessa, he managed a slight smile, the very first genuinely relaxed expression I had seen from him throughout our entire conversation. Vanessa absolutely refused to let the matter rest unresolved. She consistently and persistently encouraged me to seriously consider your specific perspective, to genuinely attempt to understand precisely why diligently preserving that cabin structure mattered profoundly enough for you to successfully maintain the secret for decades. And what fundamental conclusions did you ultimately reach as a result? I asked carefully, my voice gentle. Michael met my gaze directly and intently for the very first time in our conversation. That I honestly never genuinely knew you at all, he stated, his voice clear. That I simply accepted a convenient narrative about you, about your actual capabilities, your financial acumen, your core values, without ever seriously questioning whether it was genuinely accurate or truthful. That I regrettably reduced you to merely a convenient and simplified character in my own self-centered life story, rather than fully recognizing you as the authentic author of your own significant and independent narrative. The depth and sincerity of this heartfelt acknowledgement was so precisely what I had yearned to hear for decades that I found myself momentarily speechless, overwhelmed with emotion. After decades of consistently being underestimated, dismissed, and largely overlooked, having my own son finally genuinely recognize the fundamental mischaracterization of my true self felt overwhelmingly like a significant emotional weight being finally lifted from my shoulders. I sincerely want to personally see the cabin myself, Michael stated into the ensuing silence, not through Dad's specific lens of real estate valuation or purely with legal challenges in mind. I genuinely want to truly see precisely what you have diligently preserved all these past years to authentically understand precisely what it profoundly means to you and what it genuinely meant to your own father. I would very much like that to happen. I replied, simply recognizing the considerable courage it had undeniably taken for him to make this specific request, despite Richard's undoubted and likely strong opposition. There is something else critically important that I need to also ask. He continued, his expression growing more serious and intent once again. After extensive and honest conversations with Vanessa, after genuinely and deeply thinking about what deliberately excluding you from our wedding celebration truly represented, we have both collectively decided to completely cancel the Santorini plans entirely. This particular piece of news, while perhaps not entirely unexpected following my recent revealing conversations with Vanessa, still managed to genuinely surprise me, coming directly from Michael himself. Are you formally postponing the wedding ceremony? Not postponing, no, he quickly clarified, but rather reimagining it entirely. Vanessa and I have been actively engaged in some very honest and soul-searching conversations about precisely what genuinely matters most to us both, about commencing our marriage based upon truly authentic values, rather than external social performance or expectation. He hesitated briefly before adding, we are actively considering a much smaller, far more intimate ceremony with only the people who genuinely and truly care about us as individuals present. He paused again, seemingly searching for the right words to articulate whatever significant decision they had reached. We were collectively wondering if, that is to say, Vanessa specifically suggested. I waited patiently, allowing him the necessary time to struggle and articulate precisely what they had mutually discussed and agreed upon. Would it potentially be possible to genuinely have our wedding ceremony at the cabin itself? He finally managed to ask, his voice filled with unexpected vulnerability. By the beautiful lake, with the breathtaking sunset, casting its golden light over the tranquil water in a meaningful place deliberately built with genuine care and purpose, rather than solely a luxurious resort specifically chosen purely for its perceived exclusivity. The sheer and profound nature of this request caught me completely off guard. From being deliberately excluded from their initially elaborate and expensive destination wedding, to having them sincerely request the cabin as their chosen venue, represented such a dramatic and complete reversal of circumstances that I found myself momentarily overwhelmed with a rush of complex emotions. You sincerely want to be married at Pine Ridge? I clarified carefully, genuinely wanting to ensure I had completely and accurately understood his surprising request. Michael nodded, a visible vulnerability in his expression that I had not witnessed since he was a young boy. If we are genuinely going to begin our shared life together as husband and wife, it should unquestionably be in a significant place, possessing genuine meaning and rich history, not merely a location strategically chosen solely to impress people we barely even truly know. What about Richard's influential business connections? The strategic networking opportunities that you explicitly mentioned were so critically important to your perceived future? I could not help but gently ask vividly, remembering his previous justifications for deliberately excluding me from the event. Michael's expression momentarily hardened briefly, before softening again into something that strongly resembled genuine regret. Dad was undeniably disappointed, to put it incredibly mildly. He has been making it unmistakably clear that our collective decision to decline, including his important business associates at the wedding, represents a significant missed opportunity for my future professional advancement. He shook his head slightly, a touch of newfound perspective evident. But Vanessa genuinely helped me to clearly see that building our genuine marriage on authentic and meaningful connections truly matters infinitely more than merely cultivating strategic and transactional business relationships. This fundamental shift in perspective, consciously prioritizing genuine and heartfelt relationships over perceived strategic advantage, represented such a significant departure from the deeply ingrained values Michael had absorbed from Richard that I found myself genuinely wondering what other profound conversations had recently transpired privately between him and Vanessa. The cabin would undeniably be absolutely perfect for your wedding ceremony, I stated finally, genuinely meaning the words with all sincerity. Your grandfather would have been so profoundly pleased and proud to see it utilized for such a significant and momentous milestone event. There is one additional thing of importance that I also need to specifically ask. Michael continued, his expression becoming serious and intense once again. Regarding the trust amendment formally donating the property to the Conservancy organization, I calmly nodded, having fully anticipated this specific question. The formal amendment is not legally irrevocable yet. There is still a designated 1-year window of opportunity during which it could potentially be significantly modified or entirely rescinded. I am not explicitly asking you to immediately change it right now, Michael stated, surprising me yet again with his thoughtful consideration. At least not immediately or definitively. I sincerely believe that I genuinely need to actively earn back the legitimate right to potentially inherit that significant legacy, to visibly demonstrate that I genuinely understand and truly value precisely what it authentically represents, not merely purely as physical property, but fundamentally as the tangible embodiment of cherished family values, genuinely worth diligently preserving for future generations. This profound recognition that the cabin represented something far more meaningful than merely a financial asset was precisely what I had most sincerely hoped might eventually emerge from our recent difficult confrontation. The fact that Michael had seemingly reached this significant understanding so quickly, despite Richard's undoubtedly persistent counter-narrative and influence, strongly suggested a depth of character and personal reflection that I had previously begun to genuinely fear had been completely and permanently overshadowed by his father's controlling influence. What precisely are you proposing as a way forward? I asked, genuinely curious about how he envisioned the path ahead unfolding. First and foremost, I would sincerely like for us to personally visit the cabin together, he stated thoughtfully. For me to genuinely see it through adult eyes to truly understand precisely what you have diligently preserved all these past years. Then, if you are genuinely willing and open to the idea, I would sincerely like to actively learn from you specifically about Grandpa's skilled craftsmanship, about the specific maintenance work you have personally undertaken over the years, about the rich history intrinsically embedded within every single corner of that special place. The very idea of actively sharing the cabin experience with Michael, not merely presenting it as a simple piece of real estate property, but rather as the cherished repository of significant family history and deeply held values, created a powerful surge of profound emotion within me that I had honestly not fully expected. For decades, I had diligently maintained that special space entirely alone, actively preserving cherished memories and skilled craftsmanship without anyone else genuinely present to appreciate the extensive effort involved or truly understand its immense and profound significance. I would sincerely like that opportunity very much, I stated softly, genuinely, mining every word. And regarding the wedding ceremony itself, Michael continued seeming visibly encouraged by my positive response. We are actively considering planning something genuinely small and intimate in late summer, specifically when the beautiful wildflowers are typically in full bloom and the evening light reflecting on the lake surface is at its most stunning and captivating beauty. Just close family members and our most trusted and genuinely caring friends, people who sincerely know us precisely as we authentically are, not merely as we strategically present ourselves professionally to the outside world. The detailed vision he eloquently described was so remarkably different and far removed from the initially elaborate and expensive destination event they had been diligently planning that I found myself genuinely marveling at the profound transformation in their collective thinking and priorities. Something intangible about the cabin itself, or perhaps Vanessa's powerful perception of precisely what it genuinely represented, had undeniably catalyzed a fundamental and significant shift in their entire approach to commencing their married life together. That sounds undeniably lovely, I stated sincerely, genuinely, believing it wholeheartedly. Though I sincerely imagine Richard and Vanessa's parents might unfortunately possess other opinions regarding such a significant and unexpected change in their established plans. Michael's expression visibly confirmed my underlying suspicion. Dad is undeniably adjusting to the significant change, to put it mildly. He defensively suggested that we could at least host a separate and less formal reception at his exclusive country club specifically for his important business associates. But Vanessa was surprisingly firm and resolute in her complete refusal of that idea. A distinct hint of genuine admiration entered his voice as he added, "She explicitly told him that we were actively beginning our genuine marriage by authentically being true to ourselves, not by strategically performing for perceived strategic advantage or external validation." This particular glimpse of Vanessa actively standing up to Richard, something that had successfully intimidated individuals, far more experienced and assertive than herself, significantly reinforced my rapidly growing appreciation for her inherent character beyond her typical polished social facade. "And what about her parents?" I inquired, knowing from our previous revealing conversations that they shared many of Richard's deeply ingrained values regarding social positioning and status. They are admittedly disappointed about missing out on the seemingly Instagram-worthy destination photos. Michael admitted with a subtle wry smile that strongly suggested a newfound and genuine perspective. But something genuinely interesting transpired when Vanessa carefully explained our reasoning to them. Her mother gently pulled her aside privately and softly stated, "Perhaps, my dear, you are significantly braver than I was at your age. That there is clearly a deeper and unresolved story there that we honestly do not fully understand just yet." As our conversation naturally continued and extended into the evening hours, I genuinely felt the previously carefully maintained distance between us gradually but surely diminishing. Michael began actively asking me questions about my life experiences that he had honestly never once thought to ask before, specifically about my long teaching career, about the significant strategic financial decisions I had personally made, while diligently raising him as a single mother, about the core values my father had profoundly instilled in me that had consistently guided my life choices. For perhaps the very first time in our entire adult relationship, he genuinely appeared sincerely interested in authentically understanding me as a complete and multifaceted person, rather than the conveniently simplified character he had previously constructed within his mind. Although genuine reconciliation would undeniably require more than a single conversation, this significant opening represented the essential and crucial first step, undeniable recognition of my full and complex humanity beyond the limited and assigned role he had previously relegated me to within his own narrative. As Michael prepared to depart for the evening, he paused momentarily at the door, seemingly struggling to articulate something important that he genuinely wanted to express. "I am truly sorry, Mom." He finally managed to utter the words clearly difficult for him to voice aloud. Not merely about the specific wedding situation, but profoundly about never genuinely seeing you clearly, about readily accepting Dad's narrative without question or critical thought, about summarily dismissing your inherent capabilities and deeply held values without ever truly attempting to sincerely understand them. The apology, completely unexpected and clearly profoundly genuine, created a sudden lump in my throat, making it momentarily difficult to speak. "Thank you sincerely for saying that." I managed to respond softly, genuinely recognizing the considerable courage it had undeniably taken for him to openly acknowledge these significant failures of perception and understanding. "Next weekend," he stated as he stepped onto the porch area. "If it genuinely works for you, Vanessa and I would sincerely like to personally visit the cabin together to actively begin the process of genuinely learning about precisely what you have so diligently preserved all these past years. Next weekend would be absolutely perfect." I agreed, experiencing a cautious sense of optimism that I had honestly not expected to feel so soon after our recent challenging confrontation. As I watched his car slowly disappear down the street into the darkness, I spent time reflecting on precisely how completely the underlying dynamic of our relationship had fundamentally shifted in just 2 remarkably short weeks. From being deliberately excluded from my own son's wedding celebration to having them sincerely request the cabin as their chosen wedding venue. From being casually dismissed as financially naive and limited in capability to having my decades of strategic preservation and wisdom finally fully acknowledged and recognized. The profound transformation that had occurred was truly remarkable, in both its unexpected speed and its considerable scope. Whether this represented a lasting and permanent change, or merely a temporary reaction to the significant shock of my recent revelation, remained undeniably uncertain for the future. But for the very first time since initially discovering I had been uninvited from the wedding, I genuinely felt a tangible glimmer of heartfelt hope that something authentically positive and meaningful might ultimately be salvaged from the difficult and painful truths that had now been courageously exposed, not solely concerning the physical cabin structure itself, but more fundamentally about the intrinsic nature of our core family relationships. The planned weekend visit to Pine Ridge subsequently marked the beginning of a gradual but undeniably profound transformation in my fundamental relationship with Michael. As we actively explored the cabin structure together, him genuinely seeing it through mature adult eyes, me openly sharing meaningful stories I had honestly never previously thought he would ever be sincerely interested in hearing. I intently watched him gradually reconnect with cherished memories that had been seemingly submerged and forgotten beneath years of Richard's controlling influence. I distinctly remember this specific detail. He stated, gently running his fingers along the intricately carved chess table located on the screened porch. "You patiently taught me how to play the game here. I was honestly terrible at it initially, but you consistently refused to allow me to win easily, simply to make me feel better. Your grandfather sincerely believed that hollow victories teach absolutely nothing of value." I patiently explained, genuinely touched, that he still recalled these specific and meaningful details. He profoundly taught me that genuine respect requires expecting someone's genuine best effort, not patronizing them with artificial or unearned success. Michael nodded thoughtfully in agreement. A fundamentally different philosophy compared to Dad's approach. He consistently emphasized winning at any cost, often prioritizing appearance and outcome over genuine substance and integrity. This simple yet insightful observation directly contrasting his grandfather's deeply held values with Richard's strongly suggested a growing awareness and recognition of the distinct moral frameworks that had fundamentally shaped his life path. Throughout the entire weekend, similar powerful moments of genuine recognition occurred as Michael progressively rediscovered significant aspects of his childhood that had been unfortunately minimized or deliberately dismissed in the adult narrative he had previously constructed about himself. What genuinely surprised me the most during the visit was Vanessa's seemingly genuine and profound enthusiasm for the cabin's inherent, simple authenticity. Far removed from the status-conscious and seemingly superficial socialite I had previously assumed her to be, she displayed a surprisingly deep and sincere appreciation for the evident craftsmanship and intentional design present in every single corner of the structure. You can profoundly feel the distinct difference between something deliberately built solely to impress others versus something intentionally built to genuinely endure the test of time. She perceptively observed thoughtfully, comparing the solid and sturdy oak dining table at the cabin to the trendy but noticeably already deteriorating furniture in their city condominium. We have been needlessly spending thousands of dollars on furniture pieces that will undoubtedly not even last a mere decade, while this timeless table has successfully survived multiple generations of consistent use and still retains its beautiful appearance. The successful weekend visit concluded with a peaceful sunset boat ride on the tranquil lake, the three of us sharing a comfortable and easy silence as the golden light of late afternoon transformed the water's surface into a reflective mirror, perfectly reflecting the pine-covered shores. As we smoothly docked the boat and prepared to return to the city, Michael unexpectedly surprised me by asking a profound question I honestly never genuinely expected to hear. Would you be willing to patiently teach me, Mom, specifically about diligently maintaining the cabin structure? About the traditional skills that Grandpa personally used when he built it? I sincerely realize now that I know absolutely nothing whatsoever about the crucial process of preserving something genuinely valuable across multiple generations. The profound nature of this specific request represented significantly more than merely asking for practical knowledge transfer. It openly acknowledged the deep wisdom intrinsically embedded in my decades of careful and diligent preservation efforts. Wisdom he had unfortunately previously dismissed as completely irrelevant to his perceived sophisticated modern life. I would be genuinely honored to teach you, I replied, sincerely meaning the words with my entire heart. Over the subsequent months that followed as the summer season progressively transitioned towards their planned September wedding date, Michael and I gradually established a meaningful new weekly ritual. Every Saturday, without fail, we would drive together to Pine Ridge, where I would patiently teach him various crucial aspects of cabin maintenance that had been my solitary responsibility for 40 long years, precisely how to diligently check the hand-hewn beams for any potential signs of stress or damage, precisely how to properly clean and effectively preserve the large stone fireplace, precisely how to effectively maintain the cedar siding, to protect it against harsh weather damage. I honestly never genuinely realized precisely How much specialized knowledge and inherent skill is truly required to preserve something properly and effectively. He candidly admitted during one particular maintenance lesson. I mistakenly assumed that routine maintenance was solely about simply hiring qualified professionals when absolutely necessary, not about possessing an intimate and detailed understanding of materials and original craftsmanship. That is fundamentally the profound difference between simply owning something legally and being its responsible steward. I patiently explained. Legal ownership is purely a legal concept. Responsible stewardship is a dedicated relationship that inherently requires knowledge, attentive care, and consistent effort. These insightful philosophical discussions became just as crucially important as the practical skills I was actively imparting to him. Through these ongoing conversations, Michael began to genuinely understand that the cabin represented not merely a piece of physical property, but fundamentally embodied a distinct and meaningful value system, one that consciously prioritized genuine quality over superficial quantity, inherent durability over passing fashion trends, and enduring substance over transient appearance. Running parallel to these specific weekend lessons, another completely unexpected development progressively unfolded. Rather than maintaining the professional and emotional distance that had regrettably characterized our relationship for years, Michael began actively calling me on a regular basis, often specifically to discuss inherent tensions and challenges arising as their specific wedding plans actively continued to evolve. Dad is still actively and persistently pushing for a separate and distinct reception event at his country club. He confided during one such specific phone call. He simply cannot seem to accept the undeniable fact that we are consciously choosing a small, intimate family ceremony over strategic networking opportunities and perceived social advantage. How precisely are you effectively handling that specific pressure from him? I asked, genuinely curious about his response to Richard's undoubtedly manipulative tactics. Considerably better than I would have 3 short months ago, he candidly admitted. I am genuinely starting to clearly recognize precisely when he is framing purely personal preferences as fundamental business necessities. The distinction was simply not clear or apparent to me before this recent change. This growing discernment and critical thinking ability, the capacity to genuinely distinguish between Richard's self-serving interests and actual sound career advice, represented significant emotional and personal maturation on Michael's part. Michael was visibly developing what professional therapists refer to as differentiation, the inherent capacity to independently maintain his own distinct values and personal boundaries while simultaneously remaining actively engaged in a functional relationship with his influential father. Vanessa also underwent her own parallel and significant transformation. As the specific wedding plans steadily progressed, she gradually but noticeably distanced herself from her parents' rigid social expectations, consciously choosing authenticity and genuine meaning over superficial appearance in ways that genuinely surprised even Michael himself. She explicitly informed her mother's interior designer friend that we genuinely do not desire wedding gifts from their specific registry list. Michael reported with a mixture of amusement and genuine admiration in his voice that we would infinitely prefer contributions to the Pine Ridge Environmental Conservancy, instead specifically because actively protecting natural spaces genuinely matters more to us both than merely accumulating more unnecessary material possessions. This significant shift in focus from materialistic accumulation to environmental conservation, from external social performance to authentic personal expression, powerfully reflected a fundamental realignment of core values that I honestly never genuinely expected to witness in the seemingly status-conscious couple I had only known just a few short months earlier. The single most significant milestone in our progressively evolving relationship occurred completely unexpectedly during a powerful thunderstorm at the cabin. Michael and I had been actively working together on replacing some weather-damaged shutters on the cabin exterior when the sky abruptly darkened prematurely. We barely managed to make it safely inside the cabin before heavy rain began relentlessly pounding against the window panes, and loud thunder clapped and echoed ominously across the lake's surface. As we sat together peacefully on the screened porch area, intently watching the frequent flashes of lightning illuminate the churning water, Michael turned to face me with a genuine expression I had honestly not witnessed since he was a young child, vulnerable, clearly seeking guidance and wisdom, rather than projecting artificial certainty or confidence. "Mom, I sincerely need your genuine advice regarding something incredibly important." He began, his voice barely audible above the sound of the raging storm outside. "It is specifically about my professional career." For years, Michael had consistently, never once sought my personal input or perspective on professional matters, implicitly assuming that his chosen corporate finance career path was inherently beyond my understanding or expertise. The fact that he was now actively seeking my perspective represented a seismic and significant shift in precisely how he perceived my inherent wisdom and life experience. "I have been formally offered a prestigious promotion at the firm," he patiently explained, "to the position of Senior Vice President of Client Development. It involves more money, more significant prestige, more of precisely what I have been actively working towards for years." "That genuinely sounds like wonderful and well-deserved recognition for your efforts," I offered cautiously, detecting an underlying hesitation in his tone. "It undoubtedly would be, except for one crucial factor." He paused thoughtfully, clearly struggling to articulate something important. "The specific role would critically require me to focus primarily on actively cultivating relationships with Dad's extensive business network, strategically leveraging his established connections to successfully bring in new clients. I would, in essence, become the firm's dedicated relationship manager, specifically focused on Dad's influential world." The inherent implications were undeniably clear, and apparent increased professional dependence on Richard at precisely the moment Michael was finally beginning to establish his own psychological and professional independence. "How precisely do you genuinely feel about that particular aspect of the proposed role?" I asked, consciously careful not to impose my own personal assessment or opinion. 3 short months ago, I would have unequivocally viewed it as a perfect strategic advantage and opportunity, he candidly admitted. Now, however, I am actively questioning whether deliberately building my entire career solely upon Dad's extensive connections would ultimately undermine the genuine sense of independence I am only just beginning to courageously develop. His insightful observation reflected remarkable self-awareness and critical thinking, a clear recognition that potential professional advancement might ultimately come at the significant cost of genuine personal growth and autonomy. It was a nuanced and complex calculation I frankly would not have genuinely believed Michael capable of making before our recent difficult, but ultimately revealing reconciliation. "What specific alternatives are you currently actively considering?" I asked, genuinely curious about his approach to this critical career crossroads. "That is precisely where I would sincerely value your unique perspective and insight," he replied. "The firm currently has another opening available, initially less prestigious in title and compensation, but specifically focused on actively developing innovative environmental investment strategies for clients genuinely interested in building sustainable portfolios. The compensation package is initially lower, and the career path feels notably less certain or predictable. But something profound about it feels more genuinely aligned with the fundamental values I am actively reconnecting with here at the cabin. The crucial choice he was actively describing between external status and internal authenticity, between rigidly adhering to Richard's world and embracing values more closely aligned with my own father's, seemed to perfectly encapsulate the fundamental crossroads he had decisively reached in his own personal development journey. What would you personally do in this specific situation? He asked directly, sudden flashes of lightning illuminating his face, briefly revealing his genuine and palpable uncertainty. I carefully considered my response for a moment, keenly recognizing the significant importance of being asked for my guidance after years of being dismissed and overlooked. I sincerely cannot definitively tell you precisely which path you should choose, I stated, finally choosing my words deliberately. But I can certainly share what I have genuinely learned from 40 long years of diligently maintaining this cabin, while concurrently building a dedicated teaching career that many individuals, including your father, considered modest, limited, and lacking in ambition. Michael consciously leaned forward, actively listening with an openness and receptiveness I had rarely witnessed in our adult relationship. True and lasting wealth is not genuinely measured by what you conspicuously display to others, but fundamentally by what you diligently preserve and protect for yourself and for future generations. I continued articulating my core belief. I consciously chose to be truly wealthy in inherent things that simply could not be taken away from me. Knowledge, personal integrity, genuine purpose, and authentic relationships. That fundamental choice necessarily meant driving older, less impressive cars and living in a smaller, more humble house, but it concurrently meant never compromising my deeply held values or sense of self purely for the sake of superficial status or external approval. Thunder rumbled loudly outside as my words lingered powerfully between us, the storm outside mirroring the evident emotional turbulence of the critical choices he currently faced. I sincerely believe I have been actively chasing the wrong kind of success my entire adult life, Michael stated finally, his voice filled with reflection, consistently measuring my personal worth, using external metrics that never quite managed to genuinely satisfy something much deeper within me. 2 days subsequent to that conversation, he called to formally inform me that he had accepted the environmental investment position, thereby consciously declining the more prestigious and higher-paying role specifically tied to Richard's extensive business network. His father's disappointment was undeniably palpable and clearly expressed, but Michael had steadfastly maintained his significant decision with a quiet confidence and inner strength that profoundly reminded me of my own father's unwavering nature. The long-anticipated wedding day finally dawned, accompanied by perfectly beautiful September weather, soft golden light gently filtering through the tall pine trees, the surface of the lake calm and serenely reflective like a mirror. We had spent the entire previous week diligently preparing the cabin structure and the surrounding grounds for the celebration. Delicate string lights had been carefully hung in the trees. Simple wooden benches, thoughtfully arranged to face the lake, where a natural altar of stones had been creatively constructed. As I actively helped Vanessa with her final preparations in the cabin's master bedroom, she unexpectedly turned to face me with noticeable emotion in her eyes. "I sincerely need to genuinely thank you, Eleanor," she stated, her eyes meeting mine sincerely in the antique mirror as I carefully adjusted her simple flower crown, not solely for the physical cabin itself, but profoundly for preserving and diligently maintaining the fundamental values that Michael and I very nearly completely lost sight of. You courageously recognized their inherent worth when you were genuinely given the opportunity to truly see them. I replied, deeply touched by her evident sincerity and profound reflection. That specific quality undeniably speaks volumes about something authentic and genuine within you that was perhaps simply waiting for permission to finally emerge and flourish. She offered a sincere smile, a genuinely authentic expression so remarkably different from the carefully calculated charm I had initially encountered from her. My mother arrived considerably earlier than we initially expected, she continued. I found her sitting alone on the dock, visibly crying. When I gently inquired what was wrong, she explicitly stated that they were not tears of sadness or disappointment, but rather tears of profound recognition that this special place somehow made her vividly remember fundamental values that her own parents had strongly held before social climbing became their absolute primary priority. This evident ripple effect, how the inherent authenticity of the cabin seemed to awaken dormant priorities and forgotten values, even in the most outwardly status-conscious guests, continued throughout the entire day. Richard arrived impeccably dressed as always, but noticeably visibly uncomfortable. His usual commanding and assertive presence noticeably diminished by surroundings that clearly valued genuine substance over artificial appearance. Yet by late evening, even he appeared somewhat softened by the undeniable and genuine joy palpably evident in the celebration, his practiced networking smile occasionally giving way to brief moments of what genuinely looked like sincere reflection. The wedding ceremony itself was undeniably simple but profoundly meaningful. Michael and Vanessa exchanging heartfelt vows they had personally written, themselves speaking eloquently of building a marriage based upon authentic connection and shared values, rather than external social performance or expectation. Standing together beside the beautiful lake where 4 generations of my family had lovingly gathered, they collectively pledged to create a life together that consistently honored genuine substance over superficial appearance, responsible stewardship over mere legal ownership, and enduring legacy over fleeting momentary advantage. As the warm golden light of the late afternoon effectively bathed the gathering in a soft, radiant glow, Michael unexpectedly surprised me by adding an unplanned and spontaneous element to the ceremony. He politely requested that everyone remain comfortably seated after the traditional pronouncement of marriage, then turned to directly address the small, intimate gathering of their closest friends and genuinely caring family members. Today is not solely about commencing our genuine marriage together, he stated, his voice carrying clearly across the still surface of the water. It is also significantly about honoring important legacies that very nearly regrettably slipped away from us. He then turned directly towards me, seated in the front row of benches. "Mom," he stated, his voice filled with emotion, "would you please join us up here?" Visibly confused but profoundly curious, I made my way slowly to where they stood together by the water's edge. Michael gently took my hand, and Vanessa's intentionally creating a meaningful circle among the 3 of us. Many of you present here today do not fully know the complete and intricate story of this particular cabin. He began addressing the assembled guests, but directing his gaze intently towards me. For 40 continuous years, my mother diligently preserved this special place, not merely the physical structure itself, but fundamentally the core values it so powerfully represents, all while deliberately allowing absolutely everyone, including myself, to genuinely believe it had been permanently lost during her divorce proceedings. She diligently maintained it quietly and consistently, without seeking any external recognition or acknowledgement, precisely because she genuinely understood that certain legacies are profoundly worth protecting at any and all costs, regardless of the personal sacrifice involved. Murmurs of surprise and dawning understanding moved perceptibly through the small gathering as people began to genuinely grasp the true significance of precisely what he was so courageously sharing with them. When Vanessa and I consciously chose to be married here at this specific location, it was not solely because of the naturally beautiful setting. It was fundamentally because we profoundly desired our genuine marriage to commence in a meaningful place, deliberately built with clear intention and meticulously maintained with unwavering devotion, qualities we genuinely hope will consistently characterize our shared life together moving forward. Michael then reached into his pocket and carefully withdrew a document. I immediately recognized the formal trust amendment I had previously signed in Sarah's professional office. "Mom, here in front of these witnesses present today," he stated, his voice unwavering and filled with genuine emotion. "I sincerely want to formally give you this particular document." He then carefully handed me the formal document. It is a brand new trust amendment that I have personally had meticulously prepared. It does not explicitly restore me as the beneficiary of the cabin property. Instead, it intentionally creates a structured family stewardship arrangement whereby the property remains under your direct and continued control during your lifetime, and then subsequently passes seamlessly to a carefully designed multi-generational trust that specifically ensures it will never be extensively developed or fundamentally altered in any significant way from Grandpa's original and cherished vision and design. The sheer thoughtfulness and inherent generosity of this specific arrangement, openly acknowledging my undeniable right to fully control the property that I had diligently preserved for so long, while concurrently ensuring its permanent protection beyond any single individual lifetime, brought unexpected and genuine tears to my eyes, blurring my vision. I genuinely do not inherently desire to simply own this cabin outright. Michael continued, his voice carrying profound and genuine emotion. I sincerely aspire to be truly worthy of actively helping to steward it responsibly, of conscientiously continuing the valuable legacy of care and dedication that you have faithfully maintained for decades. In that specific moment, standing proudly beside the beautiful lake, where my own father had lovingly taught me to profoundly value genuine substance over fleeting appearance, I experienced a powerful sense of inherent completion, a full circle that had initially begun 40 long years earlier, when I first strategically created the trust specifically to diligently protect our cherished family legacy from Richard's relentless legal maneuvers and influence. What had initially commenced as a purely defensive measure had gracefully and profoundly evolved into something infinitely more significant and meaningful, a deeply held, multi-generational commitment to diligently preserving core values that were undeniably worth safeguarding. The heartfelt wedding celebration gracefully continued well into the evening hours, delicate lanterns casting a warm glow among the towering pine trees, simple but genuinely delicious food, served family style at long tables thoughtfully set out on the lawn area. I found myself actively engaged in genuine conversations with various individuals from Michael and Vanessa's lives, who seemed sincerely interested in authentically understanding the cabin's rich history and profound significance, a stark and welcome contrast to the purely networking-focused interactions I had previously anticipated encountering from their typical social circle. As night gradually fell, and countless stars began to beautifully appear above the serene lake, I quietly slipped away from the festive celebration for a brief period to sit alone on the dock, consciously absorbing the sheer magnitude and profound significance of the day's extraordinary events. The young couple actively dancing together beneath the string lights on the lawn appeared nearly unrecognizable from the seemingly status-conscious pair who had regrettably excluded me from their original wedding plans just a few short months earlier. The remarkable transformation in our fundamental relationships, moving from outright dismissal to genuine recognition, from deliberate exclusion to central importance, seemed almost too profound and extensive to fully absorb in a single evening. Sarah gently joined me on the dock, her expression thoughtfully reflecting similar sentiments. When you courageously signed that formal trust amendment document in my professional office, she quietly observed, her voice soft, did you ever genuinely imagine that it would ultimately lead to this truly remarkable outcome? Never, not even remotely. I candidly admitted, watching the vibrant celebration joyfully unfolding against the beautiful backdrop of the cabin that my father had so lovingly built with his own hands. I honestly believed I was merely protecting a tangible physical legacy. I never once genuinely imagined that I was actually consciously creating the catalyst for something infinitely more valuable and transformative. Genuine recognition, Sarah promptly supplied, echoing the precise word I had used months earlier when attempting to articulate precisely what I most genuinely desired from Michael. Not simply legal recognition of your undeniable right to the property, but fundamentally recognition of your undeniable existence as a complete and multifaceted person with your own significant and compelling life story. Yes, precisely. I agreed, watching my son and his new wife gracefully move among their guests with a groundedness and authenticity I had never previously witnessed in either of them, and perhaps also recognition of fundamental values that both of them genuinely needed but had unfortunately forgotten how to effectively prioritize in their lives. As I gradually rejoined the celebration activities, Michael approached me with 2 glasses of champagne, thoughtfully handing one directly to me. I have been actively thinking about something important that Grandpa apparently shared with you. He stated, his voice reflective, specifically about appearances being undeniably deceiving, but true ownership, representing genuine truth. I nodded, wondering precisely where his thoughts were leading him. I sincerely believe I am finally, genuinely starting to understand precisely what he authentically meant. Michael continued, his voice filled with clarity. Not merely legal ownership of physical property, but fundamentally owning your own courageous choices, your deeply held values, your authentic life path, rather than passively following one dictated purely by others' external expectations or desires. He slightly raised his glass in a toast. To courageously owning truth rather than merely diligently maintaining superficial appearances. The simple yet profound toast effectively encapsulated the remarkable and extensive transformation that had occurred in recent months, moving from a fundamental relationship built upon deep misconceptions and outright dismissal to one now firmly founded on genuine and authentic recognition and mutually shared core values. Later that evening, as guests gradually began to depart and the festive celebration began to quietly wind down, I found myself unexpectedly alone in the cabin's kitchen area, diligently washing dishes alongside Vanessa's mother, Patricia, a woman who had initially intimidated me with her polished society demeanor, but who had consistently shown unexpected depth and genuine warmth throughout the day's events. You have genuinely created something truly remarkable and profoundly special here. She quietly stated, her hands immersed in the warm, soapy water beside mine. Not solely the naturally beautiful setting for the wedding, but fundamentally the core values. It so powerfully represents values that I had very nearly, regrettably forgotten, were inherently important in life. The cabin structure itself facilitated that process. I replied simply. My father's exceptional craftsmanship possesses a unique ability to gently remind people of what truly matters in life. She gently shook her head slightly. No, Eleanor, you personally accomplished that specifically by diligently preserving this significant place when it would undoubtedly have been significantly easier and less challenging to simply let it go entirely by actively maintaining these fundamental values when the prevailing world increasingly dismissed them as outdated or irrelevant, by bravely standing your ground and asserting your worth when regrettably excluded from your own son's wedding ceremony. She met my eyes directly and intently, her gaze unwavering. That specific kind of quiet courage and unwavering conviction genuinely changes far more than just your own personal story. It undeniably creates powerful ripples that consequently positively affect absolutely everyone around you. As I prepared to gently leave the following morning, watching Michael and Vanessa embark upon their new married life together in the special cabin that would now serve as their honeymoon retreat, I reflected upon the extraordinary and transformative journey of the past 3 months. What had initially commenced with the painful discovery of my deliberate exclusion from their wedding celebration had miraculously transformed into a profound and heartfelt reconciliation that extended far beyond my fundamental relationship with Michael to positively touch multiple lives. The cabin that had successfully remained my secret sanctuary for 40 continuous years had courageously emerged from the shadows to undeniably become something far more significant and meaningful. A tangible physical reminder of core values, genuinely worth diligently preserving across multiple generations. My son, who had initially dismissed me as financially naive and limited in capability, had profoundly discovered not only my inherent capabilities, but also wisdom he now actively sought and valued. His wife, whom I had unfortunately initially misjudged as superficially status-conscious and materialistic, had bravely revealed surprising depths of genuine perception and personal courage I frankly had not previously imagined possible from her. Even Richard, though still firmly anchored within his own self-serving world of status, strategic advantage and external appearances, had been effectively compelled to genuinely recognize inherent dimensions of my character that he had conveniently minimized or dismissed in his narrative of our past relationship. The property he had carelessly dismissed as being worthless, except for the land it occupies, had unexpectedly become the sacred setting for his own son's wedding ceremony, a powerful and tangible repudiation of the values hierarchy he had meticulously constructed and rigidly adhered to. As I slowly drove away from Pine Ridge that beautiful morning, leaving the young couple to commence their married life in a special place deliberately built with clear intention and meticulously maintained with unwavering devotion, I experienced a profound sense of personal completion and deep satisfaction that genuinely transcended the specific outcomes and events of recent months. The cabin structure that I had diligently preserved through decades of quiet determination had ultimately served to preserve something invaluable within all of us, present a fundamental recognition of what genuinely endures and truly matters when superficial appearances inevitably fade and strategic advantages ultimately lose their fleeting luster. My son's wife had explicitly told me I could not attend their wedding So in response, I courageously canceled something they genuinely never expected to lose. In doing so, I had not merely successfully protected a physical legacy, but had courageously catalyzed a significant and positive transformation in multiple lives, including profoundly in my own. What had initially commenced as a purely defensive and necessary revelation had gracefully and powerfully evolved into an affirmative and courageous statement of core values, genuinely worth diligently preserving, not solely in physical structures, but fundamentally within the genuine relationships and conscious choices that ultimately authentically define our lives. Up next, you have 2 more outstanding stories right on your screen, available for you to enjoy. If this particular one genuinely resonated with you or captured your interest, you certainly won't want to pass these incredible stories up. Simply click on either one and actively check them out right now. And please don't forget to sincerely subscribe to our channel and definitely turn on the notification bell icon so you absolutely do not miss any future uploads from us.